The level of beauty this man was on far surpassed that of a woman's. He was already outstanding in his looks, and the same could be said about his martial prowess. Therefore, she couldn't figure out why he was so insistent about clinging to her. In terms of appearance, she was only delicate and pretty at best. In terms of power, she had been known as a fragile good-for-nothing. Sometimes, she couldn't help but wonder just what about her appealed to him, and whatever it was, she could change, all right? I have no other requests. Just, Long Qingxie smiled, I want to touch your hand and receive comfort for the 3 days I've spent painstakingly investigating for your sake. Hearing that, Yunwu was speechless. 3 days of investigating? She carefully scrutinized him and saw that sure enough, there were traces of travel-stained fatigue on his face. As the matter of fact, his entire complexion seemed paler than usual too. Did he actually? Her heart quivered, albeit slightly. Humans were not unfeeling creatures. Although she had always let herself appear cold-hearted, this time, admittedly, she was a bit touched. She stared at him and was quiet for a few moments before reaching up to pull away the hand he had on her chin. Then, under his startled gaze, she offered her hand to him. If you want to touch, then stop dawdling and touch. Once you're done touching, speak, she grumbled impatiently, eliciting a helpless laugh from Long Qingxie as the fascination he felt for her intensified. This little pipsqueak is too cute, he mused. He unhesitantly reached out with his large hand and grabbed her smaller one, but instead of squeezing and pinching it like he did before, this time he simply held it. Little pipsqueak, how could you be this interesting? Ah, it really makes me want to kiss you. Yunwu glared at him. Seeing the deep smile in his eyes, she began to understand that this man had a filthy mouth, but he wasn't a bad person. However, at the same time, she knew there was more to him than meets the eye. There would be a day when she sees for herself his cold, cruel, and bloodthirsty side, and she would realize that the special treatment he shows her is reserved for her only. All right, that's enough, don't keep me in suspense. Tell me what I need to do to revive my body. Give me a kiss, and I'll sell myself to you, he regarded her with a smile. Long Qingxie, do you think it's fun toying with me? If so, then you can screw off, I don't care, was the response. For someone your size, you sure have quite the impressive temper. Your husband likes that. Since you won't give me a kiss, I guess I'll do it myself. With that, he puckered his lips and leaned in. Yunwu frowned and pushed him away with a warning. Long Qingxie, amusement lingered in his gaze for a touch longer before he decided to get serious, lest his little woman lose her temper for real. All right, don't move. Get a good feel, was all he said before he tugged her to his chest and closed in on her with his seductive lips. The sudden proximity made Yunwu's heart skip a beat, and exasperated, she moved to shove him away, when a small mass of violet-colored mist slowly wafted out of his mouth, and her tightly closed lips subconsciously parted. The violet-colored mist, tingled with life force, felt cool and refreshing as it entered her mouth and seeped into her body. Her dantian began to rotate at full speed. She could feel the wondrous sensation of blood being pumped vigorously throughout her body and almost sense the leaping of each and every cell inside. After a brief moment, Long Qingxie sucked in a breath and stopped transferring yuan force, but he didn't move away. His black irises flashed, and he suddenly dove forward and sealed her luscious red lips with his, then smoothly slid his tongue into her mouth. A muffled protest was all she could manage before her mind blanked. His kiss came abruptly, and he was domineering in his conquest of her mouth. Only when their breaths became ragged from lack of oxygen did he let go. Finally free, she gasped for air, and her eyes were slightly hazy. The instant she regained her composure, however, the haze cleared and was replaced by a sharp glint, accompanied by a swing of her palm as she tried to strike him. This lecherous playboy. Little pipsqueak, you're so forceful and unreasonable. Your husband was just trying to tell you the method, why did you try to slap me? Long Qingxie squinted his eyes as he caught her hand and wrapped it in his. There was a dangerous tinge in his bewitching voice. Meanwhile, Yunwoo couldn't help but pause. Was he talking about the method to revive her body? The violet-colored mist that came out of his mouth was most likely his yuan force, a form of energy taken from his cultivation base. Her brows were furrowed as she stared closely at him and demanded an elaboration. She was certain that the process of transferring one's yuan force was liable of damaging one's cultivation base, and she couldn't help but flash back to that time in the forest and also the events from the morning. All for her. Ah, you're so ungrateful and heartless, sometimes it really makes me angry and helpless, he gave a depressed sigh. Then, a rare expression of solemnity appeared on his charming face. To revive your body, you need not only my yuan force but also 5 more things. 5 more things? Which 5? The thought of being able to become a summoner once her body was resurrected made her impatient, and it showed in her voice. The world called her worthless, so she was determined to show them what worthless looked like. She would recreate history by becoming a figure of legend, a summoner. Moreover, she'd swore she would return to the Pandemonium Palace and pluck off that damned door god's beard. Little Pipsqueak, normally you're calm and cold, so why are you so anxious now? Though you're right to be anxious because this matter shouldn't be delayed any further. Long Qingxia's voice was doting and brimmed with fondness as he rubbed her head. Although she was no longer feeling as impatient as before, having already calmed herself down, she still glared at him and berated, "You know I'm impatient about this, yet you're still going to assume heirs?" Minx, a ghost of a smile flickered in Long Qingxia's eyes. The 5 things are vitality grass, flower of 100 lives, dragon blood, sacred blood, and pure blood. Utilizing all 5 of them will grant you resurrection, he drawled. Dragon blood, she could easily get from the forbidden grounds, but the flower and grass, she had never heard of. She looked at him for help. You can get pure blood from the body of the Imperial Preceptor's son. The flower of 100 lives is rare but not impossible to obtain. The winner of this year's Imperial Hunting Tournament will be rewarded one, amongst other things. As for the vitality grass, you'll find some growing in the center of the Beast Forest's mountainous range. Gathering those 3 things will require some time and effort. 3. Yunwoo raised an eyebrow and asked, "How come you didn't say anything about the sacred blood?" "Because it's right before your eyes. As long as you want it, it'll be prepared for you." He used an enchanting look to gaze at her. Right before her eyes? After a moment of contemplation, realization dawned on her, followed by surprise. She eyed him. First, it's yuan force. Now, it's sacred blood. Tell me, just why do you treat me so well? Don't tell me you have no motives for doing so. This world does contain its share of idiots, but you're definitely not a naive, kind-hearted one. Suddenly, an incredibly mesmerizing laugh spilled from his lips. Raising his hand, he rested it on her head and tousled her hair. You know me too well, little Pipsqueak. Now, it would be embarrassing to claim that I have no motives. So what's your motive? She raised her bright eyes to look at him. Yunwoo hated owing others. If what he wanted was something she could accomplish, or if it was something in her possession, as long as he refrained from crossing the bottom line, she would be fine with giving him what he wanted. She would treat it as returning a favor and hope that afterward, he would stay away from her. However, Long Qingxia's motive left her too dumbfounded to respond. The words, "Easy, I want possession of your heart," spoken in a frank and overbearing manner, sent a sledgehammer slamming down on her heart. He had successively moved her heart, but she didn't even like him, to say nothing of giving him her heart. That night, after making a bold confession, he left without waiting for her response. Most likely, he knew he had to be patient. Or rather, he held a sense of propriety and was aware that after stirring the murky waters of her heart, the best strategy was to retreat for the sake of advancing. The next day. Early in the morning, the ambience of Yun Manor was gloomy yet imposing. The secondary presence chamber was decked in white and gray, as it was the mourning day for Yun General Manor's main wife, Lu Qingyue, and many people made their way to the mourning hall. General Yun Lingyi was absent, but regardless, quite a few prestigious individuals arrived to pay their respects. Even those from the imperial family came. It all came to prove that the general manor was considered the #1 martial family in Zhou dynasty. The entire morning was spent in mourning and bustle. At noon, an unexpected figure appeared in the morning hall. When the guards saw her, his eyes filled with a mixture of shock, dread, and fear. Yun Lingshui was dressed in white. Her eyes were watery, and she was on her knees. However, the sight of Yun Wu caused her face to change. "Slut, you're still alive," Yun Lingshui blurted. Quite a few outsiders were present. Yun Qi was also sitting in the morning hall, chatting with an old friend. Everyone promptly turned their heads towards Yun Lingshui. They saw Yun Wu, sickly and pale, stagger in while wheezing as though she had just completed a long journey. Her eyes suddenly reddened at the sound of Yun Lingshui's voice. "Third sister, I'm just want to pay my respects to great aunt, is that okay?" The voice Yun Wu used was soft and laced with entreatment. It sounded like she was choking back a sob too, leading those who heard her to suddenly feel as though they were witnessing an episode of oppression between an evil elder sister and her innocent younger sister. The outsiders were oblivious, but the Yun family members knew well the implications behind Yun Wu's appearance. Didn't the 9th miss perish in the Forbidden Grounds? Then where did this one come from? Skepticism ran through their minds, and they were shocked to the core. You're not dead." Yun Lingshui stared wide-eyed at Yun Wu, who appeared confused as she gave a feeble shake of her head. "No. Third sister, why are you insisting on my death?" Ignorance, doubt, and confusion were on full display in her tender and reddened orbs. It truly did seem as though she had no idea what Yun Lingshui was talking about. Since Yun Wu's arrival, Yun Qi's curious and insightful gaze had been fixed on her. Then, as if something had dawned on her, she suddenly looked meekly at Yun Lingshui. "Third sister, could you be talking about the time 9th sister 1 misbehaved, when you, 6th sister, and eldest sister punished me in the back mountain by lacerating me, whipping me, and throwing me off the cliff?" Yun Wu's frail body trembled a bit. I didn't die. I'm sorry, third sister." Those words of apology contained deep chagrin and fear and created quite a disturbance in the morning hall. 9th sister. She was Yun General Manor's sickly, good-for-nothing 9th miss. When she first revealed her identity, traces of disdain and ridicule had been visible in the eyes of many, but after hearing the rest of her story, their hearts filled with shock and disbelief. Whipped? Lacerated? Thrown off a cliff? And those things were done by Yun General Manor's 3 most promising misses. Who in the capital didn't know that Yun General Manor's eldest miss was gentle and amazingly talented, that the 6th miss was clever and lovable with exceptional talent, and that the 3rd miss was a legitimate daughter with both beauty and talent? They had the approval of the entire capital, but behind closed doors, the 3 misses actually had such cruel hobbies. You're spewing nonsense, the enraged Yun Lingshui paled. There were too many people present, so she could only grit her teeth and refrain from pulling out her whip. Internally, Yun Wu sneered. On the outside, she whimpered pitifully, I'm sorry, third sister, don't be mad. If you want to vent, you can lash me 100 times again with your whip. I promise to not cry." With every word, she trembled harder and harder. 100 whiplashes. Quite a few people inwardly sucked in a breath. 100 whiplashes were enough to heavily injure, if not kill, a sickly good-for-nothing like her. Wasn't the 3rd miss a bit too harsh? "Slut, why are you slandering me like this?" The color red filled Yun Lingshui's vision, and she angrily dug her nails into the cushions of her palms. "I'm not. Third sister, don't be mad, I promise I'll listen to you and stay in the back mountain. When you and the other sisters come to vent by hitting me, I won't cry. Don't be mad, third sister, okay?" In the eyes of everyone else, Yun Wu was clearly trembling with fear while still trying to appease and curry favor with Yun Lingshui. Yun Wu's words revealed that the third miss had a truly unknown side to her. You little slut, you're deliberately trying to stir trouble. Just you wait. By now, Yun Lingshue's eyes were blazing with anger, and although she'd intended to maintain her sweet facade, Yun Wu's seemingly naive and innocent words had caused her to lose all rationality. From her waist, she withdrew her whip, which she lit with teal-colored battle spirit and swung fiercely at Yun Wu. Within the younger generation, the peak of rank 1 with innate teal rank 2 was considered outstanding. Whoosh! The whip tore through the air, and it was clear that she planned to take Yun Wu's life. Meanwhile, Yun Wu's eyes flashed coldly, but she appeared to pale with fear, and her body began to shake. Right before the attack landed, she staggered back a step and unexpectedly fell to the side, just in time to avoid the whip. You dare dodge? Yun Lingxue narrowed her eyes. Dodge? As many of the spectators saw it, Yun Wu was much too weak to dodge an attack made by a practitioner at the peak of rank 1, not to mention, she was shaking like a leaf. She must have coincidentally tripped. At the same time, quite a few people thought the third miss was being excessively savage and unreasonable, and that she was going too far. Just look at the ninth miss, she was frightened and shaking to such an extent. Third sister, I was wrong, Last time, you didn't die. Today, I'll definitely beat you to death. Yun Lingshue's features contorted into a vile visage. The whip crashed down again, and this time, murderous intent flashed in Yun Wu's eyes. Although she had her own motives for appearing at the morning hall, if she had to, she certainly wouldn't mind letting the mother-daughter pair share the morning hall. However, before she could send out 2 poisonous silver needles, a great oppressive force swept out from the sidelines. When the whip was just a fingertip away from her, it was snapped in half. Yun Lingxue quickly staggered back and paled. Grandfather. Behave. A loud voice thundered, shaking the hearts of everyone present. Innate teal rank, Master Practitioner 3, unknown attribute. The whip had been broken by oppressive force alone, without the aid of any battle spirit. Strong. Old Master Yun Qi truly deserved to be the person even the imperial family had to treat with courtesy. It must be known that in Zhou dynasty, there were very few people who could break through to the rank of Master Practitioner, and no more than 10 people in the imperial household held that level of strength. The morning hall sunk into silence. You two, get over here, Yun Qi commanded seriously, sweeping his gaze over Yun Lingxue, and then Yun Wu. However, when he saw Yun Wu, an unfathomable look flickered briefly in his eyes, followed by an ineffable hint of delight. Delight? Why delight? Could it be that he caught on to something? Yun Wu knit her brows slightly, but before she could take a closer look, Yun Qi waved his sleeve and, as if furious, stormed into the inner courtyard. Just you wait. Yun Lingxue glared at Yun Wu and then immediately followed him inside. Wait? Yun Wu sneered in her heart. She was also waiting to settle old accounts, so exactly who was waiting for who? Inside the inner courtyard, presence chamber. Yun Qi was sitting atop the master's seat, and aside from Yun Lingxue, Yun Qing'er was also present. Yun Wu's arrival shocked Yun Qing'er, and she blurted, why aren't you dead? Those words again. Yun Wu stopped acting humble and fearful like before, but she still weakly lifted her head and called out, Grandfather. Although he looked at her oddly, a slight smile materialized on his solemn face. Your illness has become quite serious. Sit down and talk. Looks like this old man really did catch on to something. Yun Lingxue, on the other hand, was miffed. Everyone else was standing, so how come that slut was allowed to sit down? Grandfather, she started to whine, but the harsh expression in Yun Qi's eyes shut her up. Unlike Yun Lingxue, Yun Qing'er was practically turning green and purple, and she looked as though she was seeing something horrifyingly strange. Why was Yun Wu still alive? How could that be possible? Others might not be clear on what had happened in the Forbidden Grounds, but she, Yun Qing'er, had seen with her own eyes, the fanged man-eating vines eating away at Yun Wu. Yet here she was. Horror, Surprise, and shock, the myriad emotions that clouded and whirled in Yun Qing-er's eyes made for a rather wonderful show. A cold smile appeared in Yunwu's heart. Naturally, she had not forgotten about what Yun Qing-er owed her, and only by taking Yun Qing-er's life would the debt be repaid. Sixth sister. Why are you saying the same as third sister? Why are you both insisting on my death? How could you be alive? Impossible. That day in the Forbidden Grounds, I clearly saw you get eaten by the man-eating vines. She abruptly stopped talking. Neither her nor Lu Qingyue had thoroughly explained the events of that day. All they had said was that they saw Yunwu invade the Forbidden Grounds, and because they were worried, they followed her in. After hearing a scream, they had retreated. Upon the master's seat, Old Master Yun's insightful eyes narrowed a bit, as he immediately realized that many details from that day had been purposely kept from him. Qing-er, explain what really happened that day. Bang! The side table and even the floor quivered at the impact of his palm, causing Yun Qing-er to pale and tremble. Grandfather. Lu Qingyue had specifically told her that the matters of that day must never be revealed to the old master, or else the consequences would be grave. But now, Yun Lingxue was frightened too. Grandfather, didn't my mother already explain what happened? That slut entered the Forbidden Grounds herself. My mother and sixth sister bore good intentions to stop her, but she insisted on courting death. Good intentions? How amusing. Looks like these people enjoy placing themselves on high pedestals. Grandfather, please cease your anger. Great Aunt is the reason I was able to walk out of the Forbidden Grounds alive, so I came today to express my gratitude. Yunwu suddenly spoke up in the same fragile voice as before, but her tone was completely different. Hearing that, Yun Qi arched a questioning brow. What you're saying is that your great aunt saved you? In a way, yes. In a way. Right. The poisonous dart she shot at me before leaving just so happened to stimulate the Yin poison that had resided within my body for over a decade, so the man-eating vines were poisoned to death. Grandfather, am I not lucky? I should thank Great Aunt for her kindness, right? This time, she had no intentions to hide from Old Master Yun's keen eyes as her lips curved into a cold smile. She was extremely straightforward with her words, and Yun Qi was a well-experienced man, so how could he not have understood? However, what shocked him was the deeper meaning of everything she had divulged. Over a decade of Yin poison. This little brat was only around 15 years old. Albeit unloved, she was still a child of the Yun family, and yet for over a decade, she had been fed poison. Only someone from Yun Manor would be capable of pulling that off. Moreover, covering up what had happened in the Forbidden Grounds and shooting a poisonous dart at an adolescent girl was definitely not things Lu Qingyue, as the head madam, should have done. Everything was laid out before him. If Yun Qi still hadn't caught on, he would have lived for nothing. He clenched his hand into a fist and slammed it down on the side table. With a loud bang, the table broke into several pieces. Alarmed, Yun Lingxue and Yun Qing-er lurched back and stared in dismay at Yun Qi, who had suddenly lost his temper. Grandpa, don't listen to this good-for-nothing's nonsense, my mother would never do those kinds of things. Yun Lingxue hurriedly tried to placate him. Yun Qing-er chimed in, bobbing her head up and down, Grandpa, this slut is spewing nonsense. That day, I was with Great Aunt and didn't see Great Aunt do anything with a poisonous dart. This slut is trying to frame us, you mustn't listen to her. They had both assumed his anger was due to what Yunwu had just said, but what they didn't know was that their usages of this slut and this good-for-nothing had only irritated him even more. Yun Qi was a frank and forthright person. Although he couldn't be considered a saint, he did have an absolutely indomitable spirit, and looking at the two, he wondered if they were really his biological granddaughters. What Yunwu had said before, about the two lacerating and whipping her, appeared to be the truth. He couldn't help but lift his hand and release a rush of powerful energy that sent Yun Lingxue and Yun Qing-er flying out of the presence chamber. They cried out in alarm when the door was slammed shut in their faces. Yun-Chi's angered voice sounded from the inside, "You damn things, screw off to your respective rooms and reflect on your misdeeds. If I hear the two of you use those derogatory words again, I'll cripple you both." Scram! The half-sisters rubbed their throbbing behinds and furrowed their brows as relentless fury burned in their eyes. Their grandpa believed that slut. Damn slut, she actually dared tattle in front of grandpa. Sooner or later, I'll cut off that tongue of hers. Yun Lingshui gnashed her teeth. Abominable, murderous intent filled Yun Qing'er's eyes, and she clenched her hands into fists. Grandpa believed that slut, so we won't be able to lift our heads in front of him anymore. Third sister, we can't let her get away with this. That slut, bang! A deafening sound rang out from within the presence chamber, and coupled with Yun-Chi's furious roar, "You two haven't screwed off to your own rooms yet? You want me to cripple you both right now?" Yun Lingshui and Yun Qing'er were scared into quick, frustrated retreats. Within the presence chamber. "Little brat. How was that? Grandpa didn't disappoint you, right?" His voice, which had been furious and fuming before, was suddenly jolly, and a smile had already blossomed on his respect-inducing face. He looked Yun-Woo, appearing somewhat self-satisfied. This look, if seen by others, would unquestionably cause their jaws to drop, as Yun-Chi was often regarded as a solemn man. It was rare to see him smiling so suspiciously, and the sight caused Yun-Woo to quirk an eyebrow. Behind her wooden expression, she was secretly a bit surprised. Originally, she'd assumed he had seen through her feigned fragility, but the situation now suggested he had actually seen through her true level of strength. Otherwise, why would there still be such intense glee in his self-satisfied eyes? Grandpa must be jesting. How could I be disappointed? In this family, Grandpa is the head, and I am but a sickly, illegitimate good-for-nothing. My life and death lies in the hands of Grandpa and the moods of my sisters, no? She unreservedly shed her weak facade and laughed coldly. At her words, Yun-Chi frowned, and his eyes quickly flashed. Looks like the servants in this manor have all forgotten their places. In a bit, Grandpa will gather together every servant and teach them all a thorough lesson. As for your insensible sisters, I'll confine them in their rooms so they can reflect. Also, I'll get people to tidy up Ning Courtyard. How could a granddaughter of Yun-Chi, live in the back mountain, within a hut? Immediately, Yun-Woo could tell he was intentionally fawning over her. Truthfully speaking, she hadn't planned on interacting with the old man that much, as she was too lazy to bother with the Yun family. However, Yun-Chi's breezy attitude made her curious. Superiority was usually determined by strength, but there was also one other factor, insight. With but a short string of words and the twinkling of an eye, Yun-Chi had clarified both her situation and the relation between them. She was a miss of Yun Manor and Yun-Chi's biological granddaughter. In other words, no one should be allowed to push her around. Yun-Woo couldn't help but feel that this old man was extraordinarily shrewd. The back mountain isn't half bad. At least the chances of being poisoned there is lower, and even if I did get poisoned, I would be able to preserve my life longer than if I were in the manor. Don't you think so, Grandpa? Yun-Woo mocked coldly. Yun-Chi to once again flare with anger. The spies planted in the manor actually dared to plot against the children of the Yun family, but unfortunately, it would be difficult for the current Yun manor to take action. The brat was evidently prompting him to stir the murky waters of Yun Manor and catch fish. Brat, with Grandpa here, even if it costs me this old life, Grandpa will guarantee your safety, he promised instead of answering. He had done so because he firmly believed that she would bring the Yun family a number of pleasant surprises. Although he couldn't discern her exact level of strength, he sensed an aura from her that didn't exist before, and that aura felt strange and dangerous. 2 days ago, he had entered the forbidden grounds. He hadn't dared venture further in, but nonetheless, he had been able to see the greater part of the circumstances inside, and the shock of what he had seen still lingered. The matter of this brat escaping was definitely not as simple as she made it sound. Yun-chi planned to take advantage of her growth stage and hastily rope her back into the family, lest she decide to leave after becoming stronger. Yun-woo knew this and felt that it was a bit laughable. She did not take unkindly to Yun-chi, but the Yun family as a whole? That was a different story. However, to obtain the flower of 100 lives, she would have to rely on her identity as a miss of the Yun family. Grandpa, since you've brought matters to this point, as your granddaughter, I won't argue against moving to Ning Courtyard. Oh, and if I remember correctly, in 3 days, the imperial family will be hosting a hunting tournament, and as a miss of Yun Manor, I should qualify to take part, am I right? With that, Yun-chi suddenly understood the purpose behind her making a huge scene earlier. His eyes formed 2 crescents when he smiled and assured, of course. In a bit, Grandpa will personally handle this. Alright, then I'll be returning to the back mountain. Seeing her stand up from her seat, he hurriedly said, Brat, why don't you stay and accompany your grandpa for a bit longer? Yun-woo lifted her head and responded with a faint smile, didn't Grandpa say he was going to rearrange the manor? I won't disturb you any longer. After you finish, tomorrow I'll move from the back mountain to Ning Courtyard. Then, she turned around, and the instant she opened the door and left the presence chamber, her entire aura seemed to abruptly transform into one of sickly, fragile, feminine charm. It was plain to see that her countenance hadn't changed whatsoever, but the impression she gave was completely different. Yun-chi watched her fragile figure disappear. The brat acted quite well. Earlier, if he hadn't carefully observed her and caught the glint of murderous intent in her eyes, perhaps even he wouldn't have discovered the surprise beneath her fragility. He pondered some more. Don't tell me she's been acting like that for over a decade now. If so, she's really quite dangerous, he thought. It looked like he truly did need to rearrange the manor. Otherwise, those other arrogant granddaughters of his would most likely die without knowing how it happened. Moments after Yun-woo's departure, Old Master Yun's loud command rang out, Come, get me Wu Gang. Late at night. Lying on a battered bed was Yun-woo, whose eyes opened to reveal cold orbs. Someone was approaching. Outside, there was nothing stirring but the wind. However, nothing could escape the ears of an assassin who specialized in night ambushes and possessed hands that had long since been stained with blood. Yun-woo reached out to pull down the bed curtains one and soundlessly concealed herself in a dark corner. Shortly after, a soft click came from the locked door, and the wooden latch abruptly broke in half. The sound was almost imperceptible. Creak. The door opened very, very gently, unnoticeable like a passing breeze. Then, 2 dark silhouettes silently entered. The 2 nodded at each other and scanned the room, which was small enough to be completely swept with a single glance. Alas, they had overlooked the petite figure hiding in a dark corner near the bed. Cold light flashed in the eyes of the intruders. Without any hesitation, they flashed to the bedside and stabbed their knives through the bed curtains, into the blanket on the bed. The next instant, their eyes narrowed, and they thrust out their hands and wrenched the curtains aside. The bed was empty. Where is she? Are you 2 looking for me? A mellow but indifferent voice brushed by their ears. The 2 stiffened, but their knives slashed with incredible speed in the sound of the voice. Their actions and reaction speed met the criteria to be a standard assassin. Evidently, the 2 weren't guards, but assassins. However, how could they possibly face up against an assassin from the 21st century? 2 cold arches formed at the corners of her lips. As the knives bore down on her, she leaned slightly to the side and, in the same instant, let 2 gleaming needles fly and sink into the necks of her assassins. However, the maneuver only caused them to feel negligible pain, and neither the speed nor force of their assaults faltered. When it seemed like Yun-woo was just a breath away from losing her head, the assassins realized that they suddenly couldn't move, and astonishment appeared in the only features, their eyes, visible behind their identical black masks. They felt as though they had been turned to stone, completely incapable of movement, and only then did Yun-woo reveal herself and pin them with a frigid gaze. Who sent you? The two turned their heads, whereupon they furrowed their brows at the sight of the indisputably thin and fragile-looking girl standing before them. This was their target, the infamous sickly good-for-nothing. But how could that be? This little girl's aura was so chilling that it caused even their hearts tremble. Impossible. Otherwise, with their rank 4 strength and assassination prowess, how could they have fallen into this state? Who are you? Why are you in the hut of Yun Manor's 9th miss? One of the black-robed assassins asked coldly. Evidently, the two assassins had concluded that there was no way that she was Yun Manor's good-for-nothing 9th Mississippi. Their assumption evoked from her a biting laugh. As you've said, this is the hut of Yun Manor's 9th Mississippi. Right now, it's the dead of the night. Who else would I be, if not the 9th miss? You? Humph. How could you, the 9th miss, who was born a sickly good-for-nothing? Could you be an assassin hired by the 9th miss? Which sect are you from? We're from the Dragon sect, so unless you plan on provoking us, you'd better hand the Yun Manor 9th miss over right now. Assassin, huh? Assassins were classified as individuals who specialized in slaughter, plus hiding and gathering intellect. They were practically no different from standard killers and murderers. Their ranking system was identical to the one used to rank martial practitioners, which meant that this assassin, who claimed to be at rank 4, was rather high up in the hierarchy. From that, it was plain to see the intense murderous intent of whoever had sent them. Dragon sect? Yunwoo quirked an eyebrow and made sure to remember the name. Who sent the two of you? The assassin on the right harumphed. You have no right to know. Let us go immediately, or else, don't blame us for disregarding a fellow assassin and killing you. The shock in the assassin's eyes had been replaced with arrogance. It seemed that the Dragon sect held some extent of prestige. Even so, Yunwoo only gave a contemptuous sneer. Kill me? You guys from the Dragon sect sure know how to talk big. What, you think you can do it, with just yourselves and the 6 others hiding outside? The two assassins' faces sunk. She actually knew they had others outside? A total of 8 assassins, all rank 4 and above, had been sent out for the mission, but since they disdained teaming up against a sickly good-for-nothing, only 2 assassins took action. They never would have expected this fragile-looking girl to not only be able to detect the rest of them, but also manage to accurately count their numbers. Who exactly are you? The assassin on the left looked at her grimly. Didn't you guys say I was an assassin? Yunwoo smirked and continued coolly, then this time, I, Yunwoo, will be an assassin. Yunwoo. Could it be that she really was Yun Manor's 9th miss? The pupils of both assassins contracted. Sensations of deadly crisis suddenly rose up in their hearts, but before they could rotate their dantians and send out distress signals, 2 more silver needles entered into the backs of their necks, promptly stopping them. Ignoring their dumbfounded looks, Yunwoo turned her head and glanced outside. A hint of ghastly bloodthirst touched her eyes. Rest assured. Before I get my answers, you'll both be very safe. As for the other 6 outside, well, I'll collect them first as interest. The corners of her lips arched and slowly blossomed into a bloodthirsty smile. Nighttime was the assassin's domain, but it was also her favorite time to kill. Like a ghost, she silently slipped out from the window, into the dark night. 6 people were hiding in different areas around the hut. With a sharp dagger in hand, she laid low and proceeded. As she neared her first target, who wore the same black robes as the rest, she slowly began to rise. The color of their clothes did help them blend into the night, but unfortunately, the grass was green, so the abrupt dashes of black were rather noticeable. Having heard a faint rustle of wind behind him, the targeted assassin subconsciously turned his head. In that exact instant, Yunwoo's lips curved into a sanguinary smile, and she lunged. While covering his nose with one hand, she slid her dagger across his throat. The action was smooth, decisive, and left a deep, gushing score on his neck. His eyes were opened wide, and he was dead before he could even cry out. Unfalteringly, Yunwoo's dormant figure resumed its stealthy advancement. Who? The wind whistled. Another assassin stared wide-eyed at Yun Woo, who had cut open his throat so quickly that all he could do was feel horrified. When did this person get in such close proximity to him? Alas, he would have to ponder on it when he reaches the gates of hell. Every flash of her dagger symbolized a demise. She hunted with the night as her cloak, bearing heavy resemblance to death's sovereign as she soundlessly reaped the lives of her oblivious victims. Soon, the metallic tang of blood permeated the field of grass. Fifth one. With morbid relish, Yunwoo took in the sight of the lifeless corpse lying at her feet. Then, she ran her tongue across her lips and once again disappeared into the grass, heading for her final prey. The wind stopped, and the critters fell silent. At that moment, everything beneath the night sky seemed abnormally quiet. PSSST, no response. Quiet, too quiet. The last assassin was crouched behind a boulder, and traces of apprehension could be seen on his face. The distinctive signal sound he made had met with an ocean of silence, almost as though his companions had all disappeared. There were no movements from the two inside either. He wondered if something had gone wrong, but nothing seemed off, no murderous intent, and no suspicious activities either. Moreover, their target was just a sickly good-for-nothing, not some skilled expert. Therefore, the mission should have been smooth sailing, and yet his signal had gone unanswered, so there must have been a mishap. A sudden chill ran through his heart. He and his companions were all rank 4 and above, but perchance the mountain accommodated someone stronger. However, that thought was promptly discarded. After all, it would be impossible for a sickly, illegitimate good-for-nothing to hire someone stronger than them. Just what was going on then? A gentle breeze wafted by, carrying with it the smell of blood. Immediately upon detecting that scent, the remaining assassin's pupils contracted in shock. The smell of blood? Did the others really? He started to rise, but then all of a sudden, a spine-chilling, ice-cold voice spoke from behind him. Leaving to find the others? Startled, the assassin spun around and thrust out the sword in his hand, but the petite figure was much faster. Her dagger gave off a wicked gleam as it swept across his neck, effortlessly releasing a torrent of gushing blood. Time seemed to have stopped. The black-robed assassin stared at the emaciated girl as his eyes filled with horror and disbelief. He'd imagined a skilled expert and never would have expected the one who had soundlessly ambushed him to be such a young little girl. No need to go find them, since you'll be able to meet up with them soon, anyway. Yun Woo's lips stretched into a terrifying grin, and the depths of her eyes shone with enough coldness and bloodlust to frighten anyone who saw her. Meet up. That meant his companions had perished like him. Just who was this girl? Alas, it was already too late. As his corpse collapsed to the ground, his dim, unwilling eyes were still fixated on her, and hot blood spilled from his neck to stain the grass. Even in death, he couldn't figure out who he and his group had provoked. Their mission had simply been to dispose of a sickly good-for-nothing, but before they could even confirm whether or not that good-for-nothing was dead yet, they themselves actually ended up meeting such inexplicable ends. If they were to learn that the one who killed them was the very same, Yun Manor's sickly, good-for-nothing ninth miss, they had been too disdainful to take action on, would the blow make them want to crawl back up from hell? After she cleanly decapitated the 6 corpses, she tossed their bodies off the mountain cliff and returned to her hut, heads in hand. Bam! The heads landed in front of the 2 paralyzed assassins. Yun Woo raised her hand and swiftly freed them of their immobility. Now then, would you guys rather answer my questions on your own, or would you prefer my help? Yun Woo sneered at the extremely frightened assassins. 6. All 6 were killed. You might as well kill us too. Since we failed our mission, we will be killed nonetheless when we get back. Is that so? Yun Woo curved her lips, and her bloodied dagger glistened as she toyed with it. Humph. If you have the ability, kill us. You won't be getting a single word out of our mouths, the assassin on the right spat through clenched teeth. Yun Woo laughed thoughtfully. How tough. People like you are quite to my liking. But did you know? What I enjoy more than killing people is torturing them, and I'll keep going until they confess. Ah, just thinking about it makes my blood seethe with excitement. Would you guys like to see how I convince those who are unyielding to obediently answer my questions? The two harumphed coldly, "Do as you wish." Yunwoo didn't mind and instead grinned. After I sever their meridians, I would run my dagger along their skin, stopping every now and then to make a nick here and there until at least 1,000 little cuts have been made. While their blood seeps out, I would sprinkle some salt on each and every one of the tiny openings. Last but not least is the honey, which would be smeared onto said openings. She paused to let that sink in and then continued evenly. You guys might not know the implications of that, so allow me to clarify. Attracted by the combined aroma of blood and sweet honey, countless ants will crawl to the scene. Through the cuts, they will burrow fervently into the body and slowly nibble away at the flesh, but even under those circumstances, the person would neither die nor lose consciousness. Therefore, they would be able to hear, see, and feel with lucidity their body, flesh, and blood gradually being devoured by ants. The bloodthirstiness of Yunwoo's smile intensified, but her voice was light and casual when she mused, "I wonder, between the two of you, who would like to go first?" Although she had asked a question, she looked like she was already picking which one to start with. The two assassins felt the hairs on their bodies stand on end, and their hearts were seized with terror. You'd better let us go. We're affiliated with the dragon sect, you can't afford to provoke us, Yunwoo sneered. Before the assassin could finish, her gleaming dagger had already slashed down and pierced through one of his hand tendons. Ack! An extremely pained groan. I've never heard of a dragon sect before, so if you insist on spewing more bullshit, I wouldn't mind exchanging every word for a slit meridian, and I won't relent until the two of you decide to obediently answer my questions. The other assassin, unwilling to suffer such humiliation, tried to suicide by biting off his tongue, but Yunwoo was quicker. She swiftly thrust her dagger into his mouth and harumphed, "In front of me, death could be considered a form of luxury. Since you're so unafraid of it, this miss will let you experience a living hell." If it were anyone else, forcing well-trained assassins to disclose information might have been near impossible, but to Yunwoo, it was an easy task. Within the hut. The sound of clothes being slashed open, and the smell of blood. Ugh, when salt was sprinkled over the countless open wounds on the assassin, whose tongue had been sliced off, the excruciating pain made his eyes bulge and sent his pulsing blue veins on a rampage beneath his skin. He was lying on his back. Yunwoo proceeded to pour honey onto his lacerated body, and he was completely defenseless against the mass of ants that appeared and began to crawl into his cuts. At the sight of such brutality, the other assassin started to tremble all over. Blood drained from his face, and terror filled his eyes to the brim. He stammered, What do you want?" "Nothing. I just wanted to see if you finished contemplating yet. If not, then after I finish with this one, it'll be your turn." The corners of her lips curved upwards as she turned to him and slowly dragged the tip of her dagger along his quivering body. The fruits of his extensive training, plus his resolution, all crashed down with the collapse of his psychological state. I'll talk. It was the third miss of Yun Manor who hired us." Yunwoo's eyes chilled. The third miss. That's it. She wasn't stupid. How could Yun Lingshui, who wasn't even at rank 2 yet, have managed to invite 8 rank 4 assassins? Moreover, Yunwoo could tell just from the assassin's manners of speech earlier that this so-called dragon sect wasn't an organization normal people could get in touch with. Even with her status as a legitimate miss of the Yun family, Yun Lingshui shouldn't have been able to employ them. A casual sweep of her dagger shot shivers up the assassin's spine, and his eyes showed a hint of alarm, but he responded, "Yes, you're sure?" Yunwoo smiled calmly, whereupon the assassin shuddered and corrected himself, "No, there's also Yun Manor's housekeeper, Wu Gang. He bore the imperial token and told us to carry out the third miss's instructions, to kill the Yun General Manor's good-for-nothing 9th miss so that later on, no problems will arise." The imperial family? Again? Yunwu furrowed her brows and in her mind, once more confirmed that the person backing up Wu Gang and Lu Qingyue was definitely a part of the imperial family. Except, just who was that person? She would have to pay a visit to housekeeper Wu. The smile on Yunwu's face caused the assassin's heart to quake, and he suddenly felt a sensation of deadly crisis. He wasn't able to finish. A glinting dagger had already streaked across his throat. It was a neat and merciless move, lacking the slightest of pity-induced hesitation. Yunwu pulled off the assassin's black clothing and redressed herself. Then, like before, she decapitated the two assassins and chucked them down the cliffside. She grabbed the heads, a grand total of 8, and took advantage of the Black Knight to quietly slip into Yun Manor's back courtyard, heading for Wu Gang's room. The lights in Wu Gang's room were still lit. Perhaps he preferred sleeping that way, or maybe he was waiting for the 8 assassins to report back. Yunwu arrived, bearing a string of heads. Her entire body was clad in black, and after leaving the forbidden grounds, she had used medicine to control her violet pupils so they were back to a matching shade of black too. If it weren't for her petite stature, she would have looked little to no different from the assassins she had killed. Suddenly. "Who's there?" a harsh voice barked. A streak of yellow battle spirit struck against the room doors, blasting it open from the inside. Wu Gang's tall figure swiftly appeared outside. Those who possessed wind attributes were quite fast. Yunwu stayed in the dark. The instant Wu Gang left his room, a blood-stained dagger shot at his feet. The warning was evident. "Halt, or else. I too won't show any mercy." An old, androgynous voice, tinged with coldness, spoke, momentarily stunning Wu Gang. Then, murderous intent flashed in his eyes, and he responded, "Who are you? Invading Yun Manor in the middle of the night, are you aware of the consequences? When I was traveling the length and breadth of the country, you were still feeding from your mother's breast. Do you think a child like you is qualified to know my identity?" A shaft of red light, emitting a matchless extent of searing energy and incredible murderous intent, whizzed toward him. "Master Practitioner." Wu Gang's expression shifted, and he subconsciously fell back. Bang! The ground quaked slightly. Lowering his head, he saw that the attack had left a pit in the hard ground. Promptly, 8 bloody heads fell through the air and landed in the pit. Seeing those heads immediately caused Wu Gang's pupils to contract and his eyes to flicker with surprise. Weren't these the 8 assassins he had dispatched to kill that good-for-nothing? How come? These youngsters actually dared to attack someone their ancestor, am protecting. Prior to their deaths, they said that everything was set up by you. Is that true? Ominous murderous intent rose. Such thick, abyssal-like murderous intent shook Wu Gang's heart. Ancestor? Protecting? Was it possible that that good-for-nothing's resurrection was all due to the discreet protection of this old man? To be fire attributed, a master practitioner, able to kill 8 with ease, and have a physique like that, there was only one person who could possibly match all of those qualifications. Might Senior be the former #1 assassin of the Dragon Sect, Senior Fengxing? Wu Gang inquired respectfully as he looked at the thin, old man, whose black robes hung loosely due to being oversized. Yunwu was abruptly stunned. Senior Fengxing? Who the hell was that? The former #1 assassin of the Dragon Sect? The Dragon Sect again, huh? Honestly, the show of murderous intent and strength she had put on earlier was merely a pompous display achieved through special methods, as she had wanted to see if she could probe anything out of Wu Gang. Little did she think he would mistake her for someone else. Nonetheless, it gave her a great opportunity to continue and say, child, it looks like you are quite keen. She waved her hand, portraying herself as every little bit a worldly expert. Wu Gang's eyes instantly filled with more respect. So it really is Senior Fengxing. Please pardon this junior for his disrespectful offense just now. However, didn't Senior leave on a cultivation journey? Why is Senior Fengxing here, protecting that good for Yun family's 9th miss? Is that something a child like you is qualified to ask? Murderous intent rose again, stunning Wu Gang. He immediately remembered that assassins had their own rules and professional ethics to comply with. Wu Gang hurriedly clasped his hands together in obeisance and explained, "Senior Fengxing, please do not misunderstand. This junior didn't mean anything, just that." A cold voice swiftly broke in. "Then don't diverge from the subject. You haven't answered my question. Was it you who utilized the Imperial token to send them on the assassination?" Upon hearing those words, Wu Gang furrowed his brows. It appeared that this man really was the former #1 assassin, Fengxing. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to get that piece of information from those other assassins. "Senior Feng, certain things are better left unsaid. You are of the Dragon sect, their rules, you should know well." "Know what?" "All I know is that I owe your target a debt of gratitude. If you dare meddle, regardless of how illustrious the person behind you is, you will both bear the consequences," snapped a seemingly enraged voice. Wu Gang blanched, and a dash of humiliation appeared on his face. "Senior Feng, those words should not be spoken lightly," he warned, but he got only a disdainful "humph" in response. Finally, he grew indignant. "Fengxing, don't ignore what's good for you. Though you've left the Dragon sect, you are still a former subordinate of the Empress, so you'd better not forget your standing." "The Empress? So the Empress was behind it all? Whether I remember my standing or not is not for you to criticize. Child, tell the Empress this, don't go too far, or else, the one to fall victim to her own schemes may be herself." Then, the thin, black-robed figure disappeared into the night, leaving behind only the blood-stained dagger and the 8 heads. Wu Gang stayed rooted in place. He neither gave chase nor dared to give chase. After all, assassins were different from martial practitioners. Provoking an assassin when it was night time would ensure an unspeakable death. However, his expression was growing more and more unsightly. The next day. It was bright and early in the morning, but the back mountain was already noisy with footsteps. Judging from the volume, quite a few people had come. Inside the hut, sitting on a damaged stool was Yun Wu. She lifted the pitiable teacup in her hand and slowly took a sip of water. Bang! The door was violently kicked open. However, since it had already been broken the night before, it wasn't even bolted, to begin with. Having used too much force in that kick, the person stumbled in and almost mimicked a dog lowering its head towards the ground to eat shit. In other words, they nearly fell flat on their face. "Sixth sister, for you to visit this early in the morning is like a bestowment of great pleasure. Ninth sister can't help but shy about it." A soft voice gently rang out. Yun Wu remained seated as she smiled and observed the pale-faced Yun Qing'er. Earlier, Yun Lingshui had invited Yun Qing'er to visit and teach the good-for-nothing a lesson. Yesterday, not only were they confined to their rooms, but the entirety of the servants and guards in Yun Manor had also been reshuffled, resulting in some unpreceded activities. Most importantly, their grandpa actually planned on giving Yun Manor's best courtyard to the good-for-nothing. Ning Courtyard had always been reserved for distinguished guests. Yun Qing'er was already bearing a stomachful of anger, and the fact that their grandpa was letting the good-for-nothing use Ning Courtyard as her personal residence made Yun Qing'er burst into a fury. Therefore, as soon as she arrived at the entrance, she had kicked the door in an attempt to put on an overbearing show of strength. How could she have expected to almost kiss the ground instead? Then, hearing Yun Wu's words, Yun Qing'er instantly felt her anger rise. "You good-for-nothing, don't you know to greet your elder sister? The way I see it, you're becoming more and more undisciplined. Today, I'll take some time to thoroughly teach you what discipline is." Miffed, Yun Qing'er drew her whip from her waist and immediately lashed at Yun Wu. Despite there being no battle spirit added to the attack, the fierce whip was still powerful, nonetheless. Yun Wu neither dodged nor hid. Eyes gleaming with sharp, cold light, she reached out with her pale hand and caught the incoming whip. Whoosh! With a deft and almost imperceptible move, she pulled Yun Qing'er closer. Yun Qing-er's entire body crashed into the single one-legged table in the hut. Unable to withstand the impact, it let out a creak before collapsing. For a moment, Yun Qing-er was in so much pain that she clenched her teeth and after awkwardly clambering up, clutched her chest. However, the fall had not been kind to her ample breasts, for her breasts were now visibly squished. Sixth sister, this table isn't very sturdy. If you wanted to drink water, you could have had ninth sister get it for you. Why be so impatient? Hopefully, your chest wasn't squished out of shape. Yun Wu's seemingly innocent and pure voice was soft and gentle, but the people outside were able to hear her clearly. Everything had happened too quickly, so they weren't able to see what had happened. All they witnessed was Yun Qing-er raise her whip before suddenly rushing to the table and abruptly crushing the shabby table with her weight. Yun Qing-er's face turned red then white. Angered to the point of having flames in her eyes, she accused, "You little slut, how dare you hurt me, I'll beat you to death, ah." When she tried to stand up fully, something tripped her, and she fell down. Once again, her ample breasts collided with the table, eliciting from her a cry of pain. Looking at Yun Qing-er, who looked as though she was groveling at her feet, Yun Wu's eyes twinkled with a cold smile. There were quite a few maidservants and guards standing at the entrance. Yun Qing-er's humiliating situation prompted them to lower their heads, as they didn't dare reveal the peculiar looks on their faces. Meanwhile, Yun Lingshui had on an unsightly expression. She'd invited Yun Qing-er over so they could see the good-for-nothing state of death, but Yun Wu was actually still alive and judging from her voice, she was feeling quite lively too. Damn, what were those dragon sect assassins doing? They had the nerve to declare themselves as Zhou Dynasty's top assassination organization when they couldn't even deal with a good-for-nothing. What a waste of her personal savings. Yun Lingshui gnashed her teeth together, and then her eyes flickered with viciousness. What are you all still dawdling for? Go help the sixth miss, can't you see she's been bullied? After yesterday's rectification, everyone in Yun Manor became aware of the importance Old Master Yun attached to the good-for-nothing 9th Mississippi. The entire lot of maidservants and guards who disrespected her in the past had been sent away, so now, looking at the fragile Yun Wu, all of the servants were hesitating. What? Could it be that in this manner, no one is willing to obey this Mrs. Commands anymore? Their hesitation flamed Yun Lingshui's rage. At that, they no longer hesitated and immediately rushed into the hut. Yun Wu's eyes flashed. Suddenly. What is this? A loud voice thundered. It was Yun Qi, followed by a few guards and housekeeper Wu Gang. The furious look on his face could be seen from even a distance away. Complexion draining, Yun Lingshui turned her head and called out, "Grandpa." At once, the servants fell back and called out respectfully, "Old Master Yun." Yun Qi's furious gaze swept over them, inexplicably alarming Yun Lingshui, but he said nothing. He stepped into the hut only to see Yun Wu sitting on her damaged stool, calmly sipping water from her pitiable teacup. When she saw Yun Qi enter, she merely smiled and greeted aloofly, "Mornin', Grandpa." Beside her laid the remains of a table and sprawled atop was Yun Qing-er, who was struggling to get up. As Yun Qi approached, he accidentally stepped on her whip. He didn't need to guess to know what had happened in the hut. Yun Qing-er finally managed to climb onto her feet and asked in a sweet, delicate voice, "Grandpa, how come you're here?" Traces of anger appeared on Yun Qi's calm face. He looked at the granddaughter he'd originally thought highly of, and for the first time, he felt sorely disappointed. "Get the hell back to your own courtyard and stay there for 2 days. If I see you and Yun Lingshui take even one step out of your rooms, I'll kick both of you from the family." He was completely serious. "Grandpa, you can't," Yun Qing-er paled. Yun Qi cut her off by waving his hand and commanding, "Wu Gang, get people to send the 3rd miss and the 6th miss back to their respective rooms immediately. Anyone who dares let them out will have their legs broken." "Yes, old master," Wu Gang replied. Sixth miss, I will send you back to your room, he stood in front of Yun Qing and said respectfully. However, he peered at Yun Wu from the corner of his eye, probing and observing. Yun Wu was well aware of his scrutiny. As if oblivious, the corners of her lips raised. She looked incomparably delicate and fragile. No one would have been able to guess she was last night's top assassin Fengxing. Yun Qing wanted to say something, but Yun Qi's wrath shut her up. She could do nothing but endure and shoot Yun Wu an exceptionally hateful glare, thinking one day, she'll get even with Yun Wu. Only after her two seething sisters left did Yun Wu slowly rise from her stool. A faint smile appeared on her face as she remarked, "Grandpa, if you'd come any later, I probably wouldn't have been able to resist chopping off their heads." At that, Yun Qi was stunned and didn't know whether to cry or to laugh. After all, she was blaming him for arriving too early. When he thought about it, he realized that chances were, she wasn't lying. In that case, were his two other granddaughters' necks currently broken? Brat, nonetheless, they are still your biological sisters. If they ever push things too far, do consider giving Grandpa some face and let them off. Yun Wu lifted her eyes and asked coldly, "Grandpa, how much is your face worth?" That day her biological sisters went after her life. Where was this so-called grandpa at? If he hadn't caught on to her hidden strength, would he still be paying so much attention to her? The answer was obvious. She didn't take unkindly to him, but that didn't mean she was willing to acknowledge him as her grandfather. In both her previous and current life, she was cold-hearted. There were few things and people capable of moving her emotionally. Having said that, once she approved of someone, she would go as far as to unhesitantly fighting the heavens for them. Clearly, Yun Qi had not yet gained her approval. His expression changed slightly at her words. How could he not have understood what she meant? For over a decade, he never bothered to show concern for her. Asking her to accept him as her grandfather just because they were related was little different from him asking for the moon, but wasn't this brat being a bit too unreasonable? No matter what, he was still her biological grandfather. Despite that, he could only take in her indifferent expression and sigh helplessly. Forget it. Right now, Grandpa's face isn't worth anything. Wait until it gains some worth, then Grandpa will talk it over with you again. Now, let's go. I'll take you to Ning Courtyard. Yun Wu was a little taken aback, as she hadn't expected Yun Qi to have such a generous attitude. Anyone else probably would have been miffed. This made her regard him somewhat differently. The instant they stepped out, a guard rushed over to report, "Old Master, Crown Prince and Prince Long are waiting in the main hall." Crown Prince and Prince Long. Why did they come? Yun Qi furrowed his brows. Crown Prince? Yun Wu's eyes narrowed slightly. She had traversed and woke up in a whipped and lacerated body, courtesy of this very Crown Prince. Coupled with the fact that his biological mother was the most likely the Empress of Zhou dynasty, Yun Wu was quite curious about this Crown Prince. "Grandpa, I'll go with you," she said. Yun Qi glanced at her and seemed to have noticed something, but he didn't ask and instead nodded, let's go. While we're at it, I need to talk to His Highness about your participation in the tournament that will start on the day after tomorrow." Yun Manor's main hall was rather spacious, and of course, lavishly furnished. 20 chairs, each made from precious, ancient sandalwood, were divided evenly into 2 rows of seats, their intricately carved legs planted on the plush red carpet that adorned the floor. 2 individuals were already seated inside the hall. Sitting in the master seat was Zhou dynasty's crown prince, Zhou Tianyu. The 4-clawed dragon embroidered on his golden yellow robes was fierce and ferocious looking, which in turn accentuated his lofty identity. He was quite handsome, but lurking in his seemingly tranquil eyes was a gleam of sharpness that normal people would fail to detect. Evidently, this crown prince wasn't a simple man. When he saw Yun Qi walk in with Yun Wu in tow, he continued to placidly sip his tea. Your old subject pays his respects to your highness the crown prince. Yun Qi cupped his hands together and bowed to Zhou Tianyu, his attitude neither humble nor arrogant. In response to Yun Qi bowing instead of kneeling, Zhou Tianyu merely gave a gentle smile, and his lofty attitude from earlier disappeared instantly. He said, "Elder, there is no need to be so courteous. We are troubling you with our sudden visit. Do sit down." At the crown prince's prompting, Yun Qi took a seat in one of the side chairs, and Yun Wu followed suit. She had not uttered a single word since they entered, so Zhou Tianyu couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. Looking up, his gentle yet perceptive gaze fell on her. Which Yun family's miss might this be? Yun Lingyi had no sons and 9 daughters, but the only ones worth noting were the trio of exceptionally talented ones. This brat too is the 9th miss, named Yun Wu. Because she was born with a weak body constitution, she has had little interaction with outsiders. She is still ignorant of multiple courtesies. This old subject requests that your highness and Prince Long show leniency, lest she behaves out of conduct. Yun Qi explained. At the same time, he had conveniently provided an excuse for Yun Wu's lack of greeting. 9th? That sickly good-for-nothing from the back mountain? Zhou Tianyu's brows furrowed lightly, and in his eyes, a touch of disdain took root. However, he quickly covered it up before saying, "So it's the 9th Mississippi yesterday. I heard Elder Yun intends to have you participate in the tournament? Would the 9th Miss's body be able to withstand it?" Yun Wu replied, her voice imbued with fragility, "This subject is most grateful for your highness's concern and will make every effort as to not hinder my 3 sisters. 9th Miss has such determination." "That is indeed good, but," Zhou Tianyu hesitated. "Your highness, please be at ease. The brat is only sickly because she has led a sedentary life. This year's tournament shall serve as an opportunity for her to gain experience and exercise, nothing more," Yun Qi said loudly. The way he worded it was very astute. Dropping the topic, Zhou Tianyu turned his head to speak with the man sitting beside him, Long San 3, "This is Yun family's 9th Mississippi. During the tournament, you must take good care of her. I shall place her safety in your hands." The man had his face hidden behind a black face veil, and his voice was particularly unpleasant to listen to. It sounded like his vocal cords were severely damaged. "Okay. I will definitely protect 9th Miss well." After briefly sifting through her acquired memories, Yun Wu found no impressions of this Long San. Yun Qi, on the other hand, frowned. Prince Long was actually Long Su Kingdom's 3rd Prince 4, but due to an inauspicious divination from the kingdom's imperial preceptor, the prince was sent as a child to Zhou dynasty, where he became an exchanged prince. Alas, 15 years ago, a sudden fire broke out and ruined both Prince Long's countenance and meridians, so he became a complete good-for-nothing. Protect Yun Wu. Wasn't the crown prince clearly implying that a good-for-nothing should be paired with another good-for-nothing? Needless to say, that didn't settle well with old Master Yun. "This subject is most grateful for your highness's good intentions, but I will be fine following my 3 sisters. I won't bother Prince Long." Without warning, she broke off as violent coughs racked her body. Immediately catching on from the gleam in her eyes, Yun Qi abruptly deepened his frown and feigned alarm. "Brat, you just had to insist on accompanying me here. Now that you've seen His Highness's grandeur, hurry back to rest. Focus on recovering your health, the tournament is in 2 days." One stunned moment later, Yun Wu couldn't help but want to give Yun Qi a big thumbs up. To be capable of getting the message that effortlessly, what a veteran, indeed. Up until he spoke, she had been coughing so hard that her complexion paled, giving off the impression that she just might suddenly cough to death. She left, staggering the entire way out. Courtesies? From beginning to end, not once did she give a proper salute. Zhou Tianyu stared after her departing back. Although he harbored no blame, the disdain and contempt in his eyes increased. However, even in his dreams, he would never have imagined this good-for-nothing he was belittling to be a heaven-defying talent who was already at the early stage of rank 5 practitioner. On a small, remote hilltop in the back mountain. Upon leaving Yun Manor's main hall, Yunwoo's previous infirmity was nowhere to be found. Leaning down, she plucked a blade of grass and left it to dangle from her lips. She fell backwards onto the grass, folded both hands behind her head, and crossed her knees. The morning sunlight catered to her comfort. How troublesome. When she heard about the crown prince's arrival, she had tagged after Yun Qi so she could watch and learn. Plus, she wanted to see for herself how elegant and graceful this crown prince she had supposedly tried to curry favor with was. After the encounter, she couldn't resist the contemptuous sneer that curved her lips. Although he could be considered handsome, the way she saw it, he was nothing more than mediocre and simply incomparable to that man. Speaking of that man, she had not seen him since that night. 6 out of nowhere, Long Qingxia's strikingly attractive and bewitching face surfaced in her mind. Her eyes snapped open in shock. Damn, why must he keep appearing in her thoughts? All of a sudden, a drifting breeze carried the sound of soft footsteps to her ears. Her austere eyes flashed. Without delay, she flipped one of her hands over and steeply shot out 2 silver needles. Ah! A yelp, and then a round, black ball-like thing could be seen tumbling down the small hillside. How embarrassing! The instant the black ball clambered up from the ground, Yunwoo realized it was actually a person dressed in black clothing. The ice-cold edge of her dagger had already left a thin, red line on his throat. Who are you? Abruptly, she paused. Why? Because the sight that greeted her was one liable of frightening an average person enough to make them scream. Having been thoroughly disfigured by flames, it was an absolutely hideous and terrifying face. Seemingly to have just registered what had happened, he stammered, Don't look at me, don't look at me, as bewilderment and confusion clouded his eyes. Disregarding the burning pain at his neck, he suddenly covered his face and ducked his head. He dropped down to his hands and knees and grabbed his black face veil from the ground, where it had fallen. With hasty hands, he adjusted it back around his head, covering up his countenance. He was the one who had arrived with the crown prince and accompanied him in the main hall earlier. Prince Long Yunwoo regained her composure at the same time he did. However, what had frightened her wasn't his face, but his eyes. Those bright, obsidian orbs shone in a way that inexplicably reminded her of that man. Back then in the main hall, she had felt a familiar aura from him, but she hadn't dwelled on it. Now that she wondered, could he be? Narrowing her keen eyes, she unhesitantly struck out with lightning speed to take off his veil, then she pinched his hideous face between her fingers and pulled, trying to tear off that fake face mask, but... Ow, hurt, it hurts, he cried out shakily in that peculiarly hoarse voice of his. Meanwhile, the elasticity of his cheeks told Yunwoo that his skin was definitely real. Moreover, his hair was black. Add on the way he looked at her, with self-inferiority flickering in his eyes, glistening teardrops gathering at his outer corners, and extreme grievance, Yunwoo wanted to, for the first time, burrow into a hole. The situation, she felt like a lewd playboy who had ruthlessly deflowered and devastated this delicate flower. So awkward. Yunwoo cleared her throat and apologized, Sorry, wrong person, excuse me. With a whisk, the veil in her hand was back over his face again. She sat up while simultaneously collecting her needles from both of his legs and tucked the needles into her robes. As if nothing had happened at all, she laid back down and closed her eyes so she could enjoy the sunlight anew. A coarse voice stammered, but Yunwoo didn't open her eyes. Even so, she knew that he had furtively took a seat beside her. Hearing no response from her prompted him to sneakily shift his butt closer, slowly drawing near. Can I? If you dare come any closer, I'll cut you in half, she threatened coldly as she opened her eyes to stare at the black-clothed man, who had already nestled his body next to hers. Fright. Evidently, she'd frightened him so much that he carelessly rolled down the narrow hilltop again. Truth be told, Yunwoo's disposition had always been chilly. Towards many things, she was calm and indifferent, but today, her mood was likely a bit uncontrollable due to the embarrassment from before. Again, that black ball clambered up and started weakly. Finally, she couldn't stand it anymore. Her eyes flew open, and she glared at him coldly, barking, what? If it weren't for her leaning forward and stealthily probing his meridians earlier when she was picking out her needles from his legs, confirming that his ruined meridians were without foundation, she wouldn't have allowed him to inch closer, and closer again. The man trembled for a moment. I'm sorry. Yunwoo really couldn't understand him. How could a big OL man like him get scared just from that? Unsure herself whether it was due to annoyance or soft-heartedness, she said, all right, stop trembling. Whatever you want to say, just say it. I'm sorry, my face scared you, was the reply, making her knit her brows together. Scared her? Did it? If all it took to scare her was a face, what was she still doing in this world? Plus, her own experiences were beyond anything anyone could ever imagine. It didn't. To me, appearance, whether it be beautiful or ugly, is but a sheet of human skin. She shot him a glance and didn't bother gauging his expression. After saying her part, she stuck another blade of grass between her lips and continued to absorb the warm sunlight. Unbeknownst to her, the second she closed her eyes. Beneath his black face veil, the man who had been fearfully trembling just moments ago silently curved the corners of his lips into a bewitching smile, and his black eyes twinkled brilliantly. Then, can I be your friend? Alas, he was bluntly turned down. You also resent me for being ugly, right? I know I don't deserve to be anyone's friend, and no one is willing to be my friend either. Compared to how good-looking you are, under the bombardment of his self-inferiority and spluttering, Yunwoo opened her eyes again and sat up in frustration. She swatted aside his face veil and looked him in the eye. A person's appearance depends not on their face, but their mentality. As long as you believe you're handsome, then that's what you are. Black Ball, I'm begging you, stop prattling like you're Tang Seng One, okay? It hurts my head. Yunwoo felt like she could finally sympathize with Ho-gu too, as she almost couldn't resist the urge to feed the black-clad man a needle and henceforth shut him up. Tang Seng. Who? Black Ball. Was that referring to him? Long San fell into a visible daze, but he recovered quickly, and a grin appeared on his hideous face. A nice set of beautiful white teeth was revealed. I just knew you were a good person, that you would agree to be my friend. My name is Long San. I'm Long Su Kingdom's third prince, but when I was a child, I came to Zhou dynasty and became an exchanged prince. Though I've been alive for 25 years, this is my first time having a friend. I'm so happy. With that, his entire person fell on Yunwoo. His arms wrapped around her body, tightly hugging her as tears of joy fell from his eyes. Then, in a show of extreme excitement, he rubbed his face against the center of her underdeveloped chest. Muddled by the sudden assault and weight on her body, for a moment Yunwoo forgot to react. When did she say she wanted to be his friend? She'd intended to push him away, but hearing him say that he was already 25 years old, and yet she was his first ever friend, she couldn't help but hesitate. Forget it, she'll leave him be. They wouldn't have much interaction afterward anyway. But it wasn't long before she realized she couldn't have been more wrong. Since that day, Long San practically stuck himself to her. As long as it was daytime, no matter where she was, they would, coincidentally, bump into each other. She actually wouldn't have minded if it was just the coincidences, but that wasn't the end of his clinginess. Regardless of what she was doing, he would also relentlessly tag along. Eventually, everyone in Yun Manor learned of their friendship, and the looks of ambiguity, ridicule, scorn, and jape piled up. Yunwoo didn't care about what they thought, but she was truly annoyed to death by the man in question. Morning of the Imperial Hunting Tournament. Long San, dressed in his usual black attire and face veil, once again showed up in Yunwoo's Ning courtyard, and he even went as far as to unashamedly lie down on her bed before expressing his desire to watch her disrobe. Of course, he was ruthlessly kicked out by an enraged Yun-woo. Only after she finished changing did she walk out, and as soon as she caught sight of his face-veiled figure, she grew ill-tempered and threw him a contemptuous look. "What do you think you're staring at? Go already. Friend, today, you, really pretty." Long San complimented, as though pleasantly surprised. Yun Chi had commemorated Yun Woo's move into Ning Courtyard with gifts of silk and brocade, precious pieces of jewelry, and not to mention, an endless supply of servants and guards. Since Yun Woo disliked having servants flock around her all day, she dismissed them before they even had the chance to step into the courtyard. As for the clothes and jewelry, she'd accepted them without standing on ceremony. Currently, she was in violet attire, gorgeous yet simple and unfettered. The dress was very plain compared to the other magnificent clothes she had received, but worn on her body, it appeared drastically more beautiful. Clothes make a man just as a saddle makes a horse, this saying wasn't unjustified. Paying no heed to Long San, Yun-woo spun around and headed for the entrance, but the sleeve of her right arm was promptly seized by a large hand. "Friend, don't be mad. I'm just afraid if you get lost later, I won't be able to protect you." Under her piercing gaze, Long San broke into a wide and sincere smile. Yun-woo really wanted to give him a kick and tell him to go to hell, but every time she was angered to the point of doing just that, he would flash a brilliant, naive smile at her. It was the kind of smile that rendered her incapable of raising her hand against him. "Let go of me, and stop rambling," Yun-woo frowned, trying to shake his hand off. He stubbornly held on. "Don't be like this. Friend, you don't know, but this year's tournament is held in the palace's own exclusive beast forest. The magical beasts inside are very fierce. If you don't have my protection, you will definitely be injured." His protection? With his strength, who would be protecting who, exactly? Yun Manor, Presence Chamber. By the time Yun Woo and Long San appeared, Yun Chi and the rest of the Yun family had been waiting for some time already. Grandpa looked upon you favorably for but a short while, and yet you're already assuming airs, making us wait for this long. Slow. Ninth sister, you're quite something. Fearful of Yun Chi's presence, Yun Qing Air inwardly clenched her teeth. Yun Lingshui stood up, her eyes tinged with gloom. "Don't waste your breath on her. Doesn't she know that the envoys from the palace arrived long ago? Elder sister, sixth sister, let's go." Furtively, she shot Yun Woo a glare and took the lead in walking out. Yun Qing Air harumphed and followed. When she passed by Yun Woo, she threatened in a low voice, "You'd better be careful. If I catch you alone during the tournament, I guarantee you'll be taught a good lesson." A while back, the eldest Miss Yun Xing Air was sent to study at Wuxia Institute and returned recently so she could participate in the tournament. She'd heard about the happenings in the manor, and therefore, the sight of Yun Woo caused Yun Xing Air's beautiful eyes to flash with coldness. However, Yun Xing Air's charming face quickly reverted back to its usual expression of benevolence, accentuating her pure white attire perfectly. She gently bid Yun Chi farewell and left. One glance at the familiar view of Yun Xing Air's back caused the depths of Yun Woo's eyes to freeze over. In Yun Woo's past life, she had cared for and loved a woman as she would a close sister. That woman was San Feng, who later betrayed and put her to death. In this life, it wasn't much different. Slitting Yun Woo's tendons and throwing her off a cliff to feed wild beasts. Yun Woo hadn't forgotten this debt, not at all. During the tournament, perhaps she, Yun Woo, would be the one settling accounts instead. Yun Chi noticed the cold light in her eyes and felt a bad premonition. He furrowed his brows. "Brat, Grandpa's face may not be worth anything, but could you consider it a little and not be so angry?" Hearing that, Yun Woo smiled and replaced the frost in her eyes with their normal fragility. "I know how to hold my temper. Grandpa, there's no need for you to send me off yourself. I'll be fine just following my three sisters out." Without waiting for his response, she turned around and stepped out. Long San walked behind her, his pace neither too slow nor too hasty. He had heard every word of the exchange. Beneath his black veil, the corners of his lips lifted into a sneer, and his devilish eyes gleamed with icy bloodthirst. Was his woman someone to be provoked at will? The entrance of the imperial palace. A dozen or so carriages, each and every one luxurious, could be seen, and over 20 beauties were already standing at the side. The Yun family's large carriage stopped and immediately drew everyone's attention. Evidently, they were waiting for the three eminent Yun misses. Yun General Manor was Zhou dynasty's #1 martial family. They were a bit late to arrive, but who would dare rebuke them? However, when they saw not only the three misses, but also Yun Wu and Long San alight from the carriage, the spectators all broke into disdainful laughter and ridiculing whispers. Prince Long, a good-for-nothing with ruined meridians and a disfigured countenance. Who in Zhou dynasty didn't recognize his black-clad, black-face-veiled figure? And Yun Manor's 9th miss, a sickly good-for-nothing, was also known to all. A good-for-nothing with another good-for-nothing, a perfect match, and a laughingstock of a pair. Good. Every miss is now ready. Please follow after this humble servant, a eunuch instructed softly and respectfully before leading the group of 20-some females away. They arrived at a wide and spacious square, and it was completely empty until they heard the twittering call of a beast bird. Several pairs of eyes turned to the sky, and then quite a few people exclaimed in shock, "Beast bird mounts." 8 gigantic bird beasts were in flight. It wasn't until they landed that 8 gray-robed men came into view, each sitting atop their respective beasts. In their hands, they held onto ropes that were attached to the collar-like loops around the beasts' necks. Yun Wu drew upon her acquired memories. It seemed that this foreign world had an occupation called the beast trainer, which was what she assumed these gray-robed people were. Beast trainer. Simply put, they were individuals capable of taming ferocious magical beasts and reducing them to obedient beast pets. Domesticated magical beasts were usually weak in their attacks, so they were either treated as mere pets or mounts, at best. Despite that, beast trainers were few in number, so the occupation was a popular one. For the imperial family to have flying mounts was not unusual, but starting out with 8 at once showed that the imperials were quite extravagant. Except, wasn't the tournament this year being held in the palace's exclusive beast forest? Why were there flying mounts? Young misses, if any of you are ready, please come up. Don't worry, it's very safe, the mounted beast trainers reassured and laughed kindly. The eunuch immediately started to arrange the seating, and soon, the group was split into 8 and settled onto the mounts, after which the beast trainers urged the bird beasts into the air. The feeling of wind blowing in their faces elicited expressions of excitement and wonder from the misses, while Yun Wu, on the other hand, was apathetic from beginning to end. To her, these domesticated flying beasts were no different from livestock and utterly incapable of rousing her interest. Involuntarily, she recalled the red fire dragon and the time she sat on its neck, that was she would consider exciting. She wondered, after becoming a summoner, if it would be possible for her to secretly put the dragon under a contract. If the red fire dragon learned of her musings, it probably would have been angered to the point of giving Yun Manor another earthquake. Nonetheless, this disagreeable idea had quietly sprouted in Yun Wu's mind. The exclusive Imperial Beast Forest. It turned out to be located behind the palace, on a steep mountain ridge. If the group of pampered misses had been told to walk the entire way there, it probably would have taken them over a day of trudging to reach their destination. The view from above revealed that the Imperial Beast Forest was exceptionally large, it covered at least 1,000 acres of land. Soon, all 8 bird beasts touched down in a spacious clearing. Yun Wu leaped off the bird beast she was on and immediately concealed that instance of agility with her usual fragility. She looked around and saw that Crown Prince Zhou Tianyu and the other imperial princes were already standing off to one side, waiting for them. There were also quite a few military personnel present. Reasonably so, she concluded. They were probably there to ensure everyone's safety during the hunting tournament. The rules of the tournament this time were actually very simple. The participants would be split into groups of 2, and within the allotted time, they must hunt down magical beasts. Victory would be determined by either the number of beasts hunted or the ranks of the beasts hunted. When pairs were being assigned, the fact that Zhou Tianyu joined Yunwu with Long San came as no surprise. He even threw in a guard. Zhou Tianyu's meaning was clear: let the guard hunt beasts for the 2 good-for-nothings. In fact, everyone else was also secretly jeering and casting disdainful glances at Yunwu and Long San. After all, nobody believed they would be able to accomplish anything on their own. If it weren't for the presence of all the imperial princes, the unpleasant din of mockery might have already reached the skies. As though oblivious, she casually went to stand behind Long San. Inside, she was laughing coldly. A command was issued, and thereby, the imperial hunting tournament began. Without any hesitation at all, Yunwu recalled the place she had marked in her mind when she was surveying the area from below and quickly headed there with the rest of her group in tow. This scene, in the eyes of the other misses, gave off the impression of Yunwu rushing to hunt down beasts and win the tournament, which in turn elicited another round of ridiculing stares. As soon as Yunwu's group entered the forest, a mocking laugh rang out from behind them. Why, if it isn't Yun Manor's 9th miss? Are you aiming for first place today? Hee, don't be so hasty, the magical beasts in this forest are very ferocious, you know? So it's best if you find a weapon to defend yourself with, lest you encounter a beast and force the guard into a dilemma about who to rescue first. Right. Such ferocious beasts are unsuitable for your noble identities, so you too should stick close to the guard and avoid seeing blood. Another duo that happened to be heading in the same direction as Yunwu's group taunted and mocked as they approached. Long San's expression was impossible to see, as his black veil covered it. Yunwu's eyes chilled, but she didn't cease her movements and continued on into the forest. The 2 misses didn't plan on yielding. One of them, dressed in white robes, suddenly appeared before Yunwu. Yunwu, my father is the Ministry of War's Deputy Minister Li. You and we could be considered distant relatives. You should greet me as Sister Li, but instead, you turned head and tried to leave. Shouldn't you give me some face? Yunwu came to a stop, lifted her eyes, and looked at the beautiful girl standing in front of her. Beautiful, yes, but the girl boasted an arrogant and barbaric temperament. I don't seem to recall having any distant relatives. Miss Li, if you wish to form connections with a relative, I suggest you go to my father. I myself am not familiar with you, Yunwu sneered before walking past her. Anyone with eyes would be able to see that the girl was deliberately trying to make trouble for Yunwu. Unfortunately, Yunwu didn't have the time nor interest to deal with her. The girl, Li Mei, immediately flared up at Yunwu's words. After all, although Li Mei's father was the Deputy Minister of War, he was still a far cry from General Yun. Moreover, being so-called distant relatives was just a made-up lie. Little did she think the rumored weak and sickly Yunwu would shoot back such a sharp retort. That, of course, enraged Li Mei. However, since the guard was standing next to Yunwu, Li Mei couldn't do anything serious. That didn't mean she was willing to swallow her anger though. Li Mei's partner watched as Yunwu walked away. Furrowing her brows, the girl asked, Sister Li, you're just going to let Yun Manor's good-for-nothing go like that? The coldness in Li Mei's eyes dwindled, but her lips curved into an odd smile. Let her go. Do you think that's possible? At that, her partner's eyes lit up and filled with excitement. Could it be that Sister Li has thought of some interesting tricks again? Tell me. I can't wait to see that good-for-nothing on her knees, begging for mercy. Wait. Help me with something. Of course, Sister Li. I will definitely accomplish it, right away. Amongst the ranks of misses, Li Mei could be considered a highly talented one, therefore, she had long gotten used to being flattered and fawned on. Yunwu's attitude had undoubtedly angered Li Mei, so there was no way Li Mei would dismiss the offense. The Imperial Beast Forest was divided into 3 layers, outer, inner, and center. Magical beasts of the lower ranks occupied the outer layer, where even rank 1 and rank 2 practitioners would be able to manage. The inner and center layers, on the other hand, contained relatively high-ranked beasts and were not places for the ordinary. Hence, the hunting tournament took place mainly in the outer layer. Ever since Yunwu entered the forest and ventured further and further in, only small magical beasts and rabbits crossed her path. They were promptly ignored, making it seem as though she was not hunting, but merely rushing somewhere. The border between the outer and inner layer was near. Seeing that, the guard suddenly opened his mouth and reminded in a low voice, "Miss Yun, the peripheral border is just a short distance away. We cannot continue on any further." The peripheral border? Yunwu couldn't help but wrinkle her brows. It seemed that the palace's rear cliff was still deeper in. The reason she decided to partake in the imperial hunting tournament was not to win, but to infiltrate the palace and steal the flower of 100 lives. Indeed, her purpose was to enter the imperial treasury. She had already prodded its general location from Yunqi's mouth. In any case, she could single-handedly win the tournament, but after learning that the Empress was the one working behind the scenes, Yunwu knew that she could not expose her strength too soon. If she did, an incessant flow of attempts on her life would ensue. Before she could be considered genuinely strong, Yunwu would not let her enemy know her cards. That would be the most foolish move to make, especially since the country's Empress was her opponent. For that reason, Yunwu had to advance slowly and entrench herself at every step, all for the sake of buying herself some more time. Alas, with Long San and the guard following her, it would be hard to take action. She would have to get rid of them, somehow. Right at that moment. Help, she heard an alarming call for help. Li Mei's partner ran at full speed toward them and grabbed onto the guard, who was standing behind Yunwu. Quick, save Sister Li, she was besieged by a group of timber wolves. Quick, follow me. Timber wolves? Timber wolves were rank 2 magical beasts, so there shouldn't be any packs of them in the outer layer. Roar, howls could be heard in the distance. The guard knit his brows together tightly. So there really was a wolf pack. Could it be due to a flaw in the protective barrier of the outer layer? The Mrs. Panic, coupled with the howls, convinced him of the situation's urgency. Casting a glance over Long San and Yunwu, the guard frowned and said, "Prince Long, Miss Yun, please wait here for a while. This subordinate will return soon." The two were good-for-nothings. If anything happened to them, he could just blame it on their own feebleness. Miss Li, however, was the deputy minister's daughter. If anything happened to her, the guard would have to bear all the consequences. Without waiting for a response from Yunwu and Long San, he turned and left with the girl. How could Yunwu possibly not know what the guard was thinking? Her eyes flashed. One day, she would show the entire world what a real, good-for-nothing, looked like. Turning her head, she glanced at Long San and said, "What are you still standing here for? You're not going to follow along and take a look?" "Friend, you want me to go take a look?" Long San asked instead of answering. Beneath his black veil, his eyes were shining brightly. For a second, a touch of familiarity once again swept through Yunwu's heart, but before she could speak, Long San grinned, all right. "Friend, if you want me to go take a look, then I'll go take a look. But you can't go anywhere, wait for me to come back and protect you." Hardly had his voice faded away before his black-robed figure disappeared without a trace. Was he really a good-for-nothing? Yunwu raised an eyebrow, but then she tucked the suspicion away in the back of her mind and lifted her feet, intent on forging deeper into the forest. "Yunwu, where do you think you're going?" Behind her, a cold voice drawled. Li Mei pulled a long sword from the side of her waist and swiftly arrived in front of Yunwu, and then she braced the long sword against Yunwu's neck. "Good-for-nothing. Look at how arrogant you were just moments ago. Now that you're the only one left, do you still dare make snide remarks? Be sensible, obediently kneel down and plead for my forgiveness, lest I accidentally sever your neck or slit open your little face with my sword," Li Mei threatened darkly. Her beautiful features were distorted by an expression of hideous fury, and her charming eyes were doused with cruelty. Thanks to the fact that every team had left in different directions and that Yunwu's choice happened to be the most remote, there was no one else to be seen. Thus, Li Mei's brutal nature was completely released. Yunwu didn't seem surprised by Li Mei's appearance. As the matter of fact, some impatience flashed through Yunwu's eyes. Lifting her chin, she regarded Li Mei and the longsword coolly. "Move it away. And screw off." 6 words, spoken in a biting tone. As soon as Li Mei heard them, she felt her anger explode. A streak of cyan-colored battle spirit burst forth, and the oppressive force of a rank 2 practitioner rushed to suppress Yunwu. "You good for nothing, how dare you talk to me like that? Today, this miss will teach you a proper lesson." Li Mei swung her long sword, which suddenly appeared to weigh 1,000 kilograms, toward Yunwu's weak frame. A smug smile curved Li Mei's lips. This time, she would definitely make Yunwu kneel down and beg for mercy. However, in the next moment, the self-satisfied smile on her face froze. "Pa! Pa!" A strong oppressive force erupted when Yunwu let loose a streak of magenta battle spirit, and the sword that was pressed against her neck and shoulder instantly broke in half. Bang! Before the surprise could even register on Li Mei's face, she suddenly felt as though an astronomical amount of weight had slammed into her, abruptly forcing her to the ground. Dust flew into the air, and a human-sized pit formed beneath her body. If this scene had been witnessed by other people, they would undoubtedly be unable to resist sucking in a breath, and they would be seized by an inexplicable sense of panic. After all, Yunwu had barely done anything, and yet she'd still managed to single-handedly throw Li Mei off. Someone capable of throwing a mid-stage rank 2 practitioner as easily as one would with an old rag, and for that casual attack to dent the forest earth, would a person like that be considered a good-for-nothing? No. If a person like that was considered a good-for-nothing, then the greater part of Shenzhou continent's population would be considered trash. Yunwu looked down with apathy in her eyes. Li Mei sprawled a short distance away, rendered incapable of standing up. The pain was too intense, and her ribs seemed to have been broken. A cold glint flickered across Yunwu's dark eyes. Then, as if she disdained looking at Li Mei, Yunwu waved her arm and turned around. Before leaving, she tossed a few words over her shoulder. "Remember, there are people who you can't afford to offend. If you reveal what happened today to anyone else, I'll see to your demise tomorrow." With that, her silhouette disappeared into the forest. Li Mei's eyes contained shock and astonishment, but what showed, for the most part, was actually fury and viciousness. She, Li Mei, was a proud daughter of heaven. The one looking down on others should be her. And yet, she had been defeated by a sickly good-for-nothing. She couldn't allow that woman to stay alive. All of a sudden, while she was still immersed in her hatred, a deep and devilish voice drawled, "Looks like she's still a bit too soft-hearted." "Who is it?" The voice prompted Li Mei, who was filled with anger as she struggled to get up, to turn her head towards the source. When she saw the black face-veiled figure, she wrinkled her brows and became even angrier. "You saw everything that happened just now?" She received no response. The damaged and hoarse quality of the man's voice had completely vanished. Beneath the black veil, his disfigured face revealed a smile, but his deep and inscrutable eyes were dyed with bloodthirst. "Of course, if the little pipsqueak decides to leave something unfinished, I'll clean it up for her. I will not allow any incidents to occur, so, enjoy your trip." Li Mei was stunned. She wondered what he meant by that, but in the next moment, her pupils suddenly contracted, as though she had seen a demon crawl up from hell. An expression of absolute terror struck her. The scent of blood quickly pervaded the forest air, attracting the attention of the timber wolves she had purposely let out prior. When she was found, all that was left of her was a badly mangled and chewed-up corpse. On a steep cliff wall, a petite body was climbing, slowly but steadily, upwards. She bore resemblance to a gecko. A closer look revealed that there was a strange iron contraption clamped around her upper left arm, and a long rope of silkworm thread draped over the peak of the cliff. Yunwoo had fastened it together with flexible silkworm thread, knowing that before she became strong enough, she would have to rely on foreign materials to survive. About half an hour later, she finally reached the top of the cliff. Quietly, she snuck her way into the inner palace grounds. However, it seemed that she had slightly miscalculated. After all, even though she had a rough idea of where the treasury was located, she didn't know exactly how big the palace was. A few rounds later, she found herself lost. Damn! The first attempt was already going so poorly. Then, suddenly, a hoarse yet familiar voice sounded, "There you are, friend. What are you doing?" Long San appeared out of nowhere. As Yunwoo stared at the approaching man, her eyebrows wrinkled, and a trace of murderous intent flickered across her cold eyes. Why was he here? Could it be that he was the same as her, a feigned good-for-nothing? I got hurt, so I had the big bird send me back early. I didn't expect to find you in my residence. Long San showed her the little scratch on his finger to prove that he was hurt. Yunwoo shot him a suspicious look. This was his residence. She took in her surroundings and discovered that she was in a relatively remote place and that not too far away, there was indeed a tablet that read, Long Su Pavilion. Since Long San was an exchanged prince from another country, it wasn't strange for him to be living within the palace. However, Yunwoo couldn't be bothered to confirm if he was lying or not. She moved, intent on leaving before he decided to cling on to her again. Unfortunately, before she could even lift her feet, he grabbed onto her hand. Friend, what are you playing this time? Let's play together. Hide and seek. Or, do you want to go steal treasures? He asked in a low whisper. There was a grin on his face. Without waiting for Yunwoo to respond, he continued, Let's go. I know a path that will take us directly to the treasury, and no one will see us. Again, without waiting for her to respond, Long San seemed to be in high spirits as he sneakily dragged her towards a small pathway. The pathway required one to round a rockery, and within the rockery was a winding network of secret passages that led directly to the back of the treasury. Long San appeared to be so familiar with the path that it was almost as if he'd forged it himself. How did you know I wanted to go to the treasury? Yunwoo asked him suddenly. He turned around, seemingly astonished, and asked, Do you not want to go to the treasury? No response. Nonetheless, Long San chuckled and explained, Everyone who sneaks into the palace wants to steal treasures from the treasury. I've already met a bunch of them, so over time, I became familiar with the pathway. Friend, don't be suspicious. I won't harm you. At that, Yunwoo furrowed her brows. She felt that she just couldn't see through this Long San and that he wasn't as simple as he appeared. After walking for a long while, Long San suddenly turned around. Friend, once you exit this area, you'll reach the rear of the treasury. You have to keep your voice down, or else the treasury guardian will catch you. They were standing too close to each other. Yunwoo pulled back her hand and retreated a step. Don't follow me anymore. Go back. Then, she went around him and stepped out of the secret passageway. The treasury was divided into 5 levels. On the outside, it appeared plain and ordinary, but it wasn't hard to tell that this place was like an impregnable fortress. Since it was daytime, the guards weren't as alert as they would be at night, but they were still on patrol. Surprisingly, Long San actually listened and didn't follow after her. Yunwoo didn't worry about it. She concealed herself and circled around the treasury a few times. After she familiarized herself with her surroundings, she used the same method as before to slowly climb up the back of the treasury. Entrance of the treasury. A black-robed elder had been standing there for quite some time already. His presence was like a black pillar, making it hard for others to detect him. Suddenly, his eyes flew open, and they began to emit a cold murderous aura. This was the guardian of the treasury. Under the protection of this expert master practitioner, for years, anyone who attempted to infiltrate the imperial treasury ended up losing their lives. He'd covered the entire vicinity of the treasury in his aura so that no outside activities would escape his detection. Is the imperial treasury a place to be casually snuck into? Withdraw, or else, don't blame this old man for attacking. A voice, seemingly amplified, struck towards the back of the treasury. Yunwu's face instantly dropped. She didn't expect such a small movement from her to be discovered. It seemed that she was still too foreign to this world's powers. However, a moment later, she heard a familiar devilish laugh. Subconsciously, her heart tightened. Him. A figure flew out from behind the treasury. A head of unique silver hair swayed in the wind, and the man's bewitching face was masked by a black scarf. The corners of Long Qingxie's lips tilted into a mesmerizing smile, but the look in his eyes was scathing. The current him was a complete opposite of how he would act around Yunwu. What an arrogant old man. At your age, I'm afraid that even if I do let you attack, you wouldn't even be able to hold up a knife. Presumptuous. Who are you, to dare invade the imperial treasury? Are you not afraid that this old man will kill you? The elder was callous, and his eyes had a glacial quality to it. He'd been guarding the treasury for years and had seen a number of sharp-tongued thieves. None were able to escape alive. Surprisingly, the silver-haired man was capable of giving the elder a sense of danger, but in terms of strength, the man was no match for the elder. In Zhou dynasty as a whole, the amount of master practitioners there were could be counted on one hand. Therefore, the elder's arrogance and self-confidence weren't unjustified. A tint of cold bloodthirst entered Long Qingxie's eyes. Kill me. Old geezer, don't be so certain about who's killing who. You're just an old bag of bones. Do you really think you're capable? Humph. Anger flared in the elder's heart, and his gaze flickered with annoyance. He waved his hand, and suddenly, a streak of powerful cyan battle spirit shot towards Long Qingxie. Beneath the black scarf, Long Qingxie smirked. He didn't move. Instead, a shaft of purple light, carrying with it a scorching aura, was sent forth to meet the attack. Bang! The attack was cancelled out. The elder's pupils shrunk, and his eyes filled with surprise. Purple innate talent, a fire attribute at the peak of rank 8? Purple was the highest innate talent level. In past 100 years, in the Zhou dynasty, no one aside from the imperial preceptor's son, Nangong Yi, had purple innate talent. Unexpectedly, this thief did. Moreover, the silver-haired man was a fire attribute, which just so happened to restrict the elder's water attribute. That was why the man, at rank 8, was able to defect the elder's attack. No wonder you dared to be so arrogant. However, even if you're a purple innate talent, you'll still die under my hands. The old man's mouth lifted into a cold smile, and murderous intent burst from his eyes. Hardly had the sound of his voice faded away when the strength of his battle spirit erupted, and a longsword shot towards Long Qingxie. Just from the first attack, it was easy to tell that Long Qingxie had really angered the old man. The attack was alarmingly quick, decisive, and it would be near fatal if it hit. And yet, the devilish smile on Long Qingxie's lips remained unmoved. Then, right before the old man's anger was completely provoked, Long Qingxie finally showed signs of defeat and began to retreat. Trying to escape. Is the palace a place you can come and go as you wish? You won't be leaving with your life, the old man harumphed and gave chase, a determined expression plastered on his face. This naturally attracted the attention of the other guards, and in a flash, the entire palace fell into a state of vigilance. The situation around the treasury was the opposite, it became calm and quiet. Yunwu was lying prone against the roof of the second floor and had, of course, witnessed everything. Perhaps the other people hadn't noticed, but she had clearly seen the man throw a flirtatious glance at her as he fled in defeat. Was he luring the treasury guardian away for her? If so, then she'd be lying if she said that her heart was unaffected by his actions, but there was no time for her to ponder. Since he managed to buy her some time, she had to hasten and grab what she wanted from the treasury first. As she'd expected, even the windows of the treasury were made of iron and steel. The only way to get in was through the entrance. Fortunately, she had already made preparations before coming. She threw some strong handmade corrosive powder in an arch towards a sealed window. Promptly, the steel began to corrode, and soon, a gap wide enough for her small body to fit through was formed. "Friend, I'm here." Suddenly, Yunwoo saw a long ladder plunk down against the wall, and a black-robed Long San appeared beside her. Looking at the man on the ladder, Yunwoo's lips twitched, and she had to tightly fist her hands together to suppress the urge to reach out and choke the man to death. This bastard, did he take the imperial treasury for his backyard? At this time, he was still coming to make trouble for her. "Friend, just now I went to the emperor's inner courtyard and set it on fire. The palace must be in chaos right now, so we'll be able safe to steal from the treasury," Long San said in a happy tone. His pearly whites were visible from behind his black face veil. When Yunwoo heard his words, she was stunned. He didn't follow her because he went to set a fire. "Didn't I tell you to go back?" "I did go back. Didn't I go back to set the fire?" At that, she was rendered speechless. Sometimes, she wondered if her moment of soft-heartedness back then had been a mistake or not. Without saying much more, she squeezed her small body into the opening she had made for herself and vanished from sight. She had deliberately made the opening the mere size of her own body. That way, Long San wouldn't be able to follow her in. She didn't turn back to check because the moment she entered, she was blinded by all of the gold and treasures she found. Boxes of gold, silver, jewels, golden leaves. A quick sweep of the place told her that the second floor had at least a few hundred square meters of space, all filled up. "Wow, so many treasures." Long San's murmur suddenly sounded from behind her. Yunwoo spun around and saw that he had already entered from the window, and the opening she had crawled in through was visibly wider than before. What happened? Her eyes flashed coldly as she raised an eyebrow. As a killer, she was much more vigilant and perceptive than normal people, and yet she hadn't been able to detect him. Was he really as harmless and weak as he appeared? Under her gaze, Long San trembled a bit. He stuffed something into her hands as he stammered, You dropped this. "I copied what you did, don't be angry." I won't do it again." It was the bottle that contained her corrosive powder. However, she clearly remembered putting it back into her pocket. Had she really been careless and dropped it? Knitting her brows, she glanced at him and didn't respond. After she tucked the bottle away, she headed for the stairs that led to the treasury's 4th floor. The first 2 floors contained common gold and silver. The 3rd floor had some rare and precious medical herbs. The flower of 100 lives should be on the 3rd floor then. "Friend, are you mad at me? I promise I won't pick up the things you dropped again. Even if I do, I'll tell you. Can you not be mad at me? If you don't shut up, I'll sew your lips together," Yunwoo threatened in a low voice. "If you agree to not be mad at me anymore, I'll send my lips up for you to sew," he fawned. Yunwoo suddenly didn't know whether to laugh or to cry. Then, without wasting any more time, she quickly searched her surroundings. She didn't know how long Qingxia would be able to distract the treasury guardian, so she had to hurry. Otherwise, if the treasury guardian came back and found her, she would be in trouble. With her current level of strength, she wasn't his match. Unfortunately, even though every nook and corner was checked and double-checked, she still couldn't find the flower of 100 lives. 4th floor. When Yunwoo stepped foot onto the 4th floor, all of the thick and densely packed books she saw made her dizzy. The flower of 100 lives mostly likely wouldn't be found here either. However, she did notice something odd. The books were all either general history records or common training manuals. Logically, shouldn't the higher floors hold the more important and valuable objects? Couldn't these books have been placed in a common library? Why were they in the treasury? When she turned a dark corner, a certain bookshelf caught her eye. Her steps faltered, and she squinted slightly. She saw that on the bookshelf, there was a set of books that bore covers with designs similar to the Dragon Ascension scroll. Perhaps others would see it as a very ordinary book of prophecy, but Yunwoo found it too special to miss. This was the pattern that had followed her for 2 lifetimes. After all, she was very familiar with it. General Record of Shenzhou Continent? Yunwoo grabbed the dusty book and ran her gaze over it a few times. It had an ordinary title and equally ordinary contents. Despite that, she didn't know why, but the instant she picked up the book, she felt the Pandemonium Palace inside of her sea of consciousness react. Unfortunately, the current her was incapable of getting in touch with the Pandemonium Palace, so she didn't know what was going on. Either way, it didn't matter. She planned on taking book away with her. She collected the book and was ready to turn around when Long San, who was sticking close behind her, made her jump. "God damn, what the hell are you doing, standing behind me like that?" she rebuked angrily. "I wanted to tell you that I found the treasure." "Take a look at it," came the extremely innocent reply. "Treasure?" Yunwoo quirked an eyebrow. "Yep. Look." With an extravagant flourish, he handed her a wooden box, and she opened it to discover a silver bracelet. 7 differently colored gems laid around it, making for quite a pretty sight. But, first and second floor contained heaps of jewelry and all kinds of exquisite bracelets. In comparison, how could this silver bracelet be considered a treasure? It seemed that Long San was aware of her doubts. He took the bracelet from the box, grabbed her right hand, and slid the accessory onto her wrist. Following that, a glimmer of astonishment flickered across her eyes. The bracelet had automatically shrunk down to fit her wrist, almost as though the bracelet was intelligent. Then, a colorful light flashed, and the bracelet disappeared without a trace. Disappeared? Stunned, she stared at her bare wrist and couldn't help but reach out to touch the place the bracelet had been. There was nothing. "What's with this? Where's the bracelet?" "It's on your wrist. This is a very rare space bracelet. It possesses spirituality, and the moment you put it on, you will become its eternal owner. Just will it, and it'll appear." Long San smiled, seemingly very happy about giving the treasure to her. Meanwhile, Yunwoo found that she couldn't figure out what he was thinking. Nonetheless, she paid heed to what he said and experimentally willed the bracelet to appear and disappear again. It complied, just as though she could control it through will. "Friend, go inside and see how big the space is. This space bracelet will allow you to store and withdraw anything at will," Long San added. "Store and withdraw anything at will?" Yunwoo's heart skipped a beat. The implications of the bracelet. Without any hesitation, she willed the bracelet to appear and immediately sent her consciousness into the space dimension. A split second later, she was shocked by what she saw. The space dimension bracelet, as its name suggested, provided its owner with a portable space dimension. However, what she hadn't expected to see was the space divided into 7 sections. Each had its own color, and they were all over 100 square meters in size. In other words, the 7 sections combined totaled to at least 700 square meters. Even if she cleared out the entire treasury and dumped everything into the space dimension, there would still be space empty. Yunwoo had never encountered a space dimension before, so her blood instantly began to boil with excitement. "Where did you find this treasure?" she asked after willing herself out of the space. Her gaze jumped over to Long San, who then pointed at a dark wall. A secret compartment, which had already been opened by him, could be seen. Inside of the small compartment, there were also 2 books. Yunwoo took them out for a look. Beast Tamer Manual? Spirit Arts? Could it be that the treasury had so many floors, because they wanted to hide these books? To Yun-woo, who had witnessed the Summoner's Millennium Contract, the Beast Tamer Manual was quite disdainful. Spirit arts seemed all right. Since they fell into her hands, she would take them regardless of their use. She'd just gotten a capacious space dimension, so it'd be a waste if she didn't utilize it. She casually threw the 2 books into her space dimension, completely oblivious to the efforts and countless sacrifices other people had made to obtain them. If the people who'd spilled their blood, sweat, and tears to acquire those items were to learn that Yun-woo had deemed said items worthy of serving as mere padding for her space dimension, how many of those people would die from anger? When Long San saw her start to casually throw things into her dimension, a thoughtful smile flickered across his eyes. Perhaps in this entire world, only this woman would be so audacious. There's nothing good here. Let's go to the 5th floor. Yun-woo said before giving a slight nod and turning around to head for the staircase that led to the 5th floor. She assumed that the 5th floor would be filled with the most precious, top-grade treasures, but when she got there, she saw that she couldn't have been more wrong. The entire floor was empty, save for a black box that was sitting atop a high platform. There was only a box. It must contain an extraordinary treasure then. Unable to hold back her curiosity, she immediately stepped toward to seize the box. However, before she could touch it, a larger hand grabbed her and pulled her back a few steps. "Friend, let me do it, let me do it. I love stealing treasures." She furrowed her brows as she watched Long San stride past her. The man used his body to block her view of the platform, and then he reached out to open the box. Hiss. The moment he came into contact with it, a tiny and poisonous crimson-red snake darted out from nowhere and bit him on the back of his hand, but strangely enough, the poison didn't affect him. It was the snake that ended up dying. Long San turned his hand over and hid the dead snake by sliding it down his sleeve. A faint white glow enveloped his hand before the bite mark on it disappeared without a trace. By the time Yun-woo reached his side, Long San had already resumed his previous sidekick image and fawningly delivered the box to her. "Friend, here. Quick, open it and see what's inside." Yun-woo narrowed her eyes. She grabbed his hand and ran her scrutinizing gaze over it a few times. Smooth and without injury. A deep crease formed between her brows. "Friend, why are you looking at my hand?" "I just wanted you to see what kind of treasure is inside," Long San asked, seemingly nervous. The expression in Yun-woo's eyes darkened with doubt. "I clearly just heard the sound of a snake attacking. How come? What, snake? Where? Where? Snakes are so scary." Long San cried out. Swiftly, he launched himself at her and clung onto her body. And with that, all of her doubt was abruptly replaced by anger. "Stand up properly. If you dare casually hug me again, watch me slice you into mincemeat," Yun-woo snarled. She hated when people touched her. As she peeled the timid as a mouse Long San off of her body, she could barely refrain from kicking him away. Perhaps her warning had really scared him because despite his shaking legs, he obediently settled down. Another irritated glare was sent his way before she finally opened the box. Immediately upon seeing its contents, her lips started to twitch. Aggressively. A red bean. She'd thought that even if it wasn't some rare treasure, it'd at least be something like a special item or a pill. However, what lay before her eyes was a tiny red bean. Moreover, it was an old and shriveled-up bean. She picked it up and turned it left and then right, but no matter how she looked, it was still just a red bean. Having all of her anticipation deflated like that made her feel a bit upset. She furrowed her brows and cursed, "Is everyone in the imperial family retarded or something? How is this little dried-up bean a treasure?" She hadn't noticed the look of shock that appeared in Long San's eyes when he first caught sight of the bean. "That isn't a red bean, it's a seed. Don't throw it away, go back and plant it into the dirt." Yun-woo turned her head and squinted. "Seed? How do you know?" My homeland has this kind of seed. It will blossom into a beautiful flower. Really, I'm not lying. Blossom into a beautiful flower. After one more glance at the red bean, she thought for a moment and then tossed it into her space dimension. She actually didn't like flowers that much, but if she could one day live a life of leisure, then she wouldn't mind taking the seed out to help her nurture her own temperament. There was nothing else in the room. Let's go collect some interest. Since the flower of 1,000 lives was still nowhere to be found, it was probably already taken out of the treasury beforehand. If that was the case, then the only thing they could do was return to the Imperial Beast Forest and act accordingly. By the time they reached the 3rd floor, Long San had already understood what she meant by interest. Anywhere she went would be swept bare, and soon, the 3rd floor was left with only empty shelves. This level of cruelty made even him raise his eyebrows. By the time they reached the 2nd floor, Long San, who was standing behind her, was wearing a funny smile on his face. His eyes were dyed with its usual devilish glow as he murmured to himself, "What a cute little pipsqueak." Again, with just a few waves of her hand, everything was thrown into her space dimension. Yunwoo noticed that no matter how many items she put in there, the dimension still appeared empty. This was when she realized that the items would shrink to half of its original size when it was placed into the dimension. This greatly reduced the amount of space taken up, which made Yunwoo very happy. She headed for the 1st floor, intent on ransacking the entire treasury to anger the Emperor and Empress to death, but right at that moment, faint footsteps could be heard coming from outside. "Long San, you leave first." Yunwoo immediately ordered the man behind her. Without waiting for his reaction, she hastily made her way to the 1st floor. As expected, the 1st floor was much more spacious than the other floors, and it was filled to the brim with not only gold and jewelry, but also plenty of good weapons, strange and colorful stones, and things that resembled crystal balls. Since she was running out of time, she sped around the floor blindly pouring everything into her space. When the sound of a lock opening entered her ears, her figure flashed and instantly appeared on the 2nd floor, where she had made the opening earlier. Unfortunately, right as she was about to make her escape, a powerful aura descended on her. "Who are you? To dare intrude the Imperial Treasury? You won't be leaving with your life." When Yunwoo saw the old Treasury Guardian, her heart tightened. It appeared that Long Qingxie hadn't been able to finish him off. Fortunately, her face was already covered from when she made preparations earlier. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw that in the distance, a middle-aged man, dressed in yellow imperial robes, was approaching with a large number of guards. This surprised her a bit. Who would have expected this operation to attract even the old man emperor over? Despite that, she wasn't too flustered. Her years as a killer had long tempered her mind and heart. If she couldn't fight them, then, run. What good would dignity be if she was dead? Seeing the old expert fly towards her, she quickly brandished her hand and aimed a poisonous needle at him. When he moved to dodge, she immediately took advantage of the brief respite to dash towards the back of the treasury. Raising her hand again, she shot a thin strand of silkworm thread out to latch onto a distant tree before kicking off. Her body launched into the air. Once she was at a reasonable distance from the ground, she extracted her silkworm thread. Earlier, she had already familiarized herself with the treasury's surroundings so that in case of an emergency, she could escape in the quickest time possible. In the blink of an eye, she landed on the ground and quickly burrowed into the secret passage. She could faintly sense that the old expert had also landed and was giving chase. She decided against escaping through the path she had arrived, lest she bump into Long San and drag him into this mess with her. Fortunately, the passage branched off elaborately, so she randomly picked a route to follow. Only, it seemed that her luck wasn't very good. As soon as she left the passage, she found herself on a cliff. It was a dead end. And not long after she left the passageway, the old expert also emerged. "Child, let's see where you can run to now." The cold voice carried with it traces of anger. The old expert's face was very gloomy, as if he had really been thoroughly provoked. Without waiting for her to respond, a ray of cyan battle spirit flashed, and he manifested 3 blue arrows. They shot towards Yunwu at an alarming speed. Her face fell, and she quickly released a burst of magenta battle spirit. She manifested a sword and intended to defect the arrows with it. Clang! 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 The sounds of sharp collisions. Yunwu only felt a strong force push against her before she was forced back a few steps. What valiant strength! Give me your life! The old expert raged as a powerful aura began to rise. Again, 3 arrows appeared and flew towards her. A sense of crisis took over Yunwu, and she tried to use her sword to defect the arrows again, but... Clash! The sword broke. All 3 arrows went straight for her chest, and she subconsciously fell back. However, she'd forgotten that she was on a cliff. The moment she lost her footing, she felt an arrowhead break through her spirit armor and sink into her chest, where excruciating pain began to spread. At the same time, one of her poisonous needles also hit the old expert, causing his expression to change drastically. As she'd said before, anyone who wanted to take her life must pay in blood. The scene of her falling off the cliff just so happened to be seen by Long Qingxie, who had been hurriedly making his way to her. Instantly, murderous bloodthirst dyed his deep eyes as his rage soared to the heavens. You dare hurt her, an earth-shattering roar of anger, akin to a wild beast's, cut through the air. Then, a shaft of strange light shot out from both of his eyes, and before the old expert even had time to panic, his body was suddenly blown into pieces. Blood, organs, and guts splattered everywhere. Long Qingxie's devilish face was extremely cold as he stepped past the gore and unhesitantly leaped off the cliff. Layers upon layers of mist shrouded the area below as he plunged downwards. Under the sharp pain coming from her chest, Yunwu felt a moment of sluggishness. However, it would take more than that to kill her. Just as she caught her breath and prepared to use her silkworm thread to slow down her fall, she looked up and caught sight of that silver-haired man recklessly hurling down towards her. Did he lose his mind? Yunwu opened her eyes widely and was shocked with astonishment full in her eyes. At the first time, she felt her heart would jump out from her throat. Almost in the blink of an eye, he caught up with her and held her in his arms. What? Have been silly after seeing your husband? The voice was still like a kind of evil spirits, however, in this moment, it let Yunwu feel relieved unexpectedly. Their bodies still continued to fall. Are you crazy? The Yunwu frowned and looked at him. The Long Qingxie gave a wicked smile. Yeah, I've been crazy since I met you, and I'm afraid I'll never get over it, so you should be responsible. Then Yunwu's heart fluttered. However, she also heard such words in the previous life, and the heartbreak due to being betrayed made her dare not to embark on the affection again. Facing to him, she was in an emotional turmoil. She couldn't owe him anything anymore. She raised her left hand that wore and a silkworm thread was fired out of the iron contraption on the wrist in an instant. It swooshed and went up straightly. It did not wait for Long Qingxie to make a reaction, and their bodies suddenly stopped and immediately swung in midair. I can't afford what you want, so now it's a life for a life, and we don't owe each other, Yunwu indifferently said, withdrew the line of sight, and controlled the speed of the decline of this silkworm thread. A life for a life? Long Qingxie raised his eyebrow and looked at Yunwu. He could recognize she was touched at that moment, but why did she relapse into usual apathy in a twinkling of an eye? He had investigated all what had happened to her in the last 15 years. She barely had contact with men, so it was impossible that she fell in love with another man. However, he always felt that her heart was full of a kind of indifference experiencing numerous vicissitudes. As if her not only froze her heart, but also locked it in the deepest depths of the abyss, not giving anyone the opportunity to touch. Long Qingxie was surprised by her change. But he had said that he was going to make her fall in love with him. You, little girl, really make your husband sad. Long Qingxie whispered as a touch of tenderness and love slowly flashed across his eyes. At that time, the slowly falling two bodies stopped again. The silkworm thread was not long enough. Yunwu knitted her eyebrows and looked up at Long Qingxie. Take the swords, use them and climb down along the cliff by yourself. When she finished her words, two long swords appeared out of nowhere in the right hand of Yunwu. How about you? I'll figure it out on my own. Still have no way, huh? Then hand over yourself to me and rely on me, Long Qingxie laughed. Before Yunwu made any response, she just saw he caught her waist with one hand and grabbed one long sword with the other hand to raise a small wisp of battle spirit and then backhand thrust that sword into the cliff. The weight of the two bodies was borne by the cliff, and Yunwu felt the stretching force in her arm was gone. Yunwu did not understand what he wanted to do after all, but she still got the silkworm thread back. Hold tight, the man said in her ear with a wicked voice. Then, whoosh! They fell sharply down. Yunwu's face slightly changed, and she subconsciously held him tightly. You're out of your mind. Long Qingxie wore a faint smile and hugged her on waist slightly hard. Little girl, if you felt afraid, close your eyes. And when he finished his words, he pushed the cliff with tiptoe, and his body fell down like an eagle and went to the bottom of the cliff. The strong wind was blowing to his face and the silver hair was flying in the air. This scene was so beautiful that it was a little suffocating. The white fog dissipated and the cliff bottom was close at hand. Landed like an eagle with the foot on the ground, Long Qingxie already stood in that cliff bottom with his arm around Yunwu's waist. But in next second, no chance for Yunwu to response. Zip! Yun's clothes were torn open and made a sound. Yunwu felt cold in the chest with shock in her eyes. You! That geezer made the sharp arrow with water element. What? Ah! Suddenly, a piercing pain let Yunwu shout inwardly. She lowered the head to see that Long Qingxie's palm spread a strong suction that sucked out 3 sharp arrows inside her body. A series of movements were fast and neat. The whole process perhaps took less than 10 seconds. Take a rest and I'll find some animal blood for you. After gathering up her clothes, Long Qingxie let her sit on the ground, then got up and quickly disappeared in the dense jungle. Yunwu, who looked pale, watched his back and couldn't help frowning, and there was a trace of confusion in the deep of her eyes. What kind of person was this man? On the ground, the 3 arrows with blood unexpectedly began to become a pool of water little by little. Sizzle! The pool of water, under the sunshine, turned into a wisp of black smoke and disappeared without any trace. It seemed that those arrows would have really melted in her body if they weren't sucked out by Long. When Yunwu just began to regulate her status, Long Qingxie's figure, just leaving for a while, unexpectedly came back from the distance. This speed really let Yunwu wonder whether he did walk away or not. Drink it. Long Qingxie pushed a jade bowl with warm animal blood in it to the side of her mouth. Yunwu looked up, met his inscrutable and deep eyes, stretched out her hand to take over, and raised head to drink up that bowl of disgusting animal blood with bad smell. Perhaps because the body was dead, Yunwu felt that this small wound not threaten her life. But the blood was helpful to preserve her present body. Even it was disgusting, she had to drink it. Thank you. When the bowl was handed back to him, Yunwu thanked him in a low voice. Long Qingxie lifted the corner of mouth, sat on the ground beside her and was close to her. Come here, have a nap and replenish some strength. It will take some strength to get out of this evil beast forest. Evil beast forest? Yunwu looked around and found the trees were high, the grass was thick and light was dim, so they should be in the middle of the forest. It was seemed that they should drop into the evil beast forest. Because the whole treasure house had been ransacked, the emperor was so angry that he almost vomited blood. The palace was in unprecedented anger and guard in a sudden. In particular, when the guards for searching found that the old man was blown up into parts on the edge of the cliff, a storm was set off in the whole palace once again. Therefore, the emperor immediately called many military generals and courtiers and intended to discuss a plan to chase the thieves. At the hall, almost every courtier was here, even including the old master Yun Qi, who had been called into the palace and was standing in front of the courtiers at that moment. The emperor, Zhou Batian, was in his 50s and sitting in a high position. At that time, he had a serious face full of worry, looking at a middle-aged man in a white robe at the hall, and asked in a deep voice, "Imperial Preceptor, about today's disaster happening to the palace, have you gotten any result from the divination? Do you know who did it?" Hearing the words of Zhou Batian, many present courtiers naturally put their eyes on the man in a white robe. The middle-aged man was the imperial preceptor of the Zhou dynasty, known as the first prophet of God, and it was said that he had the ability to divine the past and the future. At the same time, he was also one of the few master practitioners in Zhou dynasty and even had great talent of blue rank. Nangong Shui looked at the divination situation on the ground and knitted his eyebrows. After a long while, he waved his hand and picked up the divinatory symbols on the ground. "Your Majesty, the disaster of today is the effect of a cause that the royal family planted 15 years ago. According to divination, ransacking the treasure house today is just a beginning, and, from now on, there will be." Nangong Shui did not go on telling the next part. Hearing his words, the ministers present began to whisper. The deputy minister of war said, "Imperial Preceptor, since you can divine those, you should also be able to divine who did it. Now the most important thing is to catch the thief. Yeah, whatever the cause and effect is, as long as the thief is caught, all thing will be solved." But at that time, Yun Qi, standing in the first place, opened his mouth. Imperial Preceptor unexpectedly predicted this kind of result, which can only show that things are certainly not so easy. You shouldn't be so hurry. Firstly, let us listen to Imperial Preceptor's next words. Yun Qi's words made Nangong Shui have a soft smile. Long time no see, dear General Yun. Yun Qi saluted by cupping his hands and said in a husky voice, "Cut the crap. Tell us all results of your divination." Because of Yun Qi's power and identity, it was natural that no one dared to say anything. It is the unknown divination that has never appeared before. It is even I that cannot fully understand the meaning of the divination. Therefore, there are no next words. The sagacious eyes of Nangong Shui was full of deep helplessness. Zhou Batian frowned and put on a sulky face. "Imperial Preceptor, what do you mean about the unknown divination? Is the disaster of palace the price paid for the cause and effect that you said?" Those words, as if with a force of the invisible majesty, made all the ministers fall silent in a moment and lower their heads. Obviously, everyone felt the emperor's hidden anger at that time. In addition to one point, Zhou Batian also had the peak strength of the 9th rank. In the face of both strength and power, the weak and the courtiers must lower heads and submit. Nangong Shui was still calm and indifferently said, "Your Majesty, I can't understand that divination, but I watched the stars last night and divined that a summoner would show up in our Zhou dynasty in the near future." Hearing that it was impossible to figure out the divination, Zhou Batian had a sullen look, but with the words behind, a flash of shock and ecstasy came into his eyes. "Summoner?" The people present all were very surprised in the moment of hearing that. Summoner? That hadn't happened in hundreds of years, and it almost became a legend. However, the imperial preceptor's divination had never been wrong. So would the Zhou dynasty really have a summoner soon? In that case, the Zhou dynasty would be able to dominate the other two kingdoms or even to annex them, if only the summoner had been roped in. At the thought of this, the matter that the treasure house was ransacked and the death of the master practitioner seemed unworthy of being mentioned in an instant. Imperial Preceptor, where is the summoner you mentioned now? Zhou Batian asked in a slight hurry. As Nangong Shui waved his white robe, a white mist appeared in the sky. He slowly said, "If my divination wasn't wrong, the summoner to be born soon will bring about a double-sided effect on the Zhou dynasty. What is a two-sided effect? Zhou Batian asked. Enemy or friend? This choice depends entirely on that summoner. If he is a friend of Zhou Dynasty will step up to a higher level. However, once he becomes an enemy, it will be the end of the Zhou Dynasty. You mean, once he chooses to be our enemy, the Zhou Dynasty will be destroyed? Yun Qi was somewhat shocked. The country would be destroyed. This time, not only Zhou Batian changed his face, but all the courtiers present instantaneously showed a look of fear. At this time, some image began to emerge in the white fog in the sky, and people could not help but stare at the gradually clear image in the middle of the sky with nervousness. This was a matter of unification or destruction of the country in the future. In any case, they must draw the summoner over to their side. Otherwise, they could only destroy him. But when Yun Qi, who stood in front of the crowd, saw clearly the image in the white fog, his eyes widened in surprise suddenly. The House of Yun. How was this possible? So the summoner was actually a people from Yun family? Who was it? In his mind, there seemed to be no proper one. After all, it was extremely difficult to be a summoner. Nevertheless, before Yun Qi recovered from the shock and suspicion, all the fervent view, including Zhou Batian's, fell on him. Old General Yun, it seems that there will be a happy event in your house in the near future. Yes, we're not sure about other families, but it's definitely a friend if the summoner is born in Yun family. That's right. Yun family is the first military family of the Zhou dynasty. It's always righteous, selfless, and loyal to the empire. If the summoner comes from Yun family, it would be absolutely lucky for the Zhou dynasty. I agree. In the hall, when people saw the gate of Yun house in the image of white fog, they were relieved and praised Yun family with great flattery. Of course, many people were jealous. However, in the face of those obsequious ministers, Yun Qi did not feel any slightest joy. Hundreds of years ago, there had been a summoner born in Yun family. This time, predicted by Imperial Preceptor, there would be a summoner in Yun family, but it was unsure whether it would be a blessing or a curse. Old Yun, it seems that I should go to Yun house more often when I am available, haha. A touch of indescribable emotion flashed across Zhou Batian's eyes, as he burst out laughter on the spot. With the forthcoming summoner of Yun family, the unification is just around the corner. Congratulations, Your Majesty. When an old minister finished his words, the other ministers present immediately congratulated together loudly and kneeled down to Zhou Batian. Only Nangong Shui and Yun Qi stood still. This was a world respecting strong men. As long as one was strong enough, he didn't need to kowtow to the emperor. This was a privilege of the strong men. Therefore, it was normal that Nangong Shui and Yun Qi didn't kneel. Well, stand up then. I learned that many descendants, including 4 girls from Yun family, from ministers participated in today's hunting competition. You accompany me to watch it. Aye. After a while, a group of ministers went out of the hall with the emperor and headed for the evil beast forest. Yun Qi did not immediately follow them, he turned to look at Nangong Shui who wore a gentle smile. Imperial Preceptor, make it clear if you have something to tell me. A smile flashed across the wise eyes of Nangong Shui, since you have such keen outsight, I believe I have nothing to worry about. What do you mean? Yun Qi could not understand what he meant. Be kind to your 9 granddaughters, because the summoner will be one of them, which will also determine the future of your family. My granddaughters? Yun Qi's heart trembled. But soon, he frowned as he thought of one possibility. And this possibility actually made him feel a little scared. Nangong Shui casually glanced at some corner of the hall, and then his lips slightly raised. He slowly turned away with no more words. The main palace of imperial harems. On the magnificent chair was sitting a beautiful woman in her early 30s. Her golden gown set off her noble elegance. She held the cup, gracefully took off the lid and slowly tasted the fragrant tea. Even the fact that an assassin dressed in black entered didn't disturb her at all. After quite a while, she put down her cup and raised her eyes in a casual way. What did you learn? According the divination of Imperial Preceptor, there will soon be a summoner in the Zhou dynasty, and that summoner will be one of the 9 girls in Yun family. The assassin in black murmured his report. Hearing these words, she frowned. A touch of darkness and coldness crossed her beautiful eyes in an instant. Didn't you hear which of the 9 girls will be the summoner? The assassin shook his head. No, Imperial Preceptor didn't point the name out. He only reported to the emperor and ministers that the summoner is from Yun family, but secretly told Yun Qi that the summoner is one of Yun's 9 granddaughters. 9 granddaughters? So, that woman's daughter was included. The woman's eyes grew gloomier. A gloomy breath emanated from her body, and her beautiful face was somewhat fierce. Last time you reported that 8 assassins had been killed, and it was done by your predecessor top assassin, Feng Xing, she said in a very soft voice, but the assassin kneeled on the ground, shivering all over. Yes. Crash. A cloud of black fog rose, as her slender and white hand grasped the air. The seat next to the assassin was pinched to pieces for no reason. The weird force made the assassin's face pale and his heart trembled fiercely. I'm incompetent. Punish me, my queen, his voice was quivering with fear. The woman's eyes were narrowed, while the black pupils changed slowly into purple, became a straight line and seemed extremely bloodthirsty and ferocious. If I punish you, I'm afraid you couldn't get out of here alive. Thank you for your kindness, my queen. Go back and tell your master, bring Feng Xing into the palace for me whatever you do. As soon as the soft words were said, she waved her hand and the broken chair beside assassin caught black fire. In a few seconds, there was no residue left after a light wind blew. The assassin quivered, and hurried away respectfully, with fright. Deep in the evil beast forest. This area belonged to the range of advanced evil beasts. Just as Long Qingxie said, she really needed a lot of physical strength to get out of this area of evil beast forest. Just like now. As soon as they came in the forest, they were surrounded by a group of 4th-rank fire wolves. Ferocious green light shined in their gloomy eyes in the dark forest. Their bodies were red and their fangs were sharp. The surrounding air temperature soared as the wolves howled and threw flames out of their tails. As soon as these wolves appeared, the Dragon Ascension Scroll in her mind had given her information. 4th-rank Fire Wolf, lived in groups, with fire property, strong offensive force and high agility, and its special ability was fire attack. Evil beasts were divided into 9 ranks. The evil beasts above 6th rank owned wisdom, so the evil beasts above 6th rank were high-rank evil beasts. After breaking through the 9th rank, the evil beasts could transform into human form. Of course, it was far more difficult to break through ranks for evil beasts, compared with humans. However, the attack power of evil beasts was innumerable times stronger than that of humans of the same rank. Up to now, the evil beasts over the 9th rank hadn't been found in Shenzhou continent. It's 4th-rank Fire Wolf. If you can't cope with it, hide behind me. Looking at the fire wolves that surrounded them, Long Qingxie took a step forward, fondled A1, his silver hair and put on a bloodthirsty smile. Thank you, but I've never had the habit of hiding behind others. Yunwu also lifted the lip corner, came up and stood with him side by side. It was not difficult to realize the good mood of Long Qingxie. You're really the girl I like. You're so bold that I can't control my love again. Too much nonsense. Yunwu rolled her eyes upwards. Suddenly, a wisp of purplish-red battle spirit rose. With Yunwu's thought, a sword showed up in her hands. I will break through from the right side, leaving the left and middle parts to you. As the indifferent words were finished, she quickly attacked the wolves with the sword, which was condensed by fighting spirit. Will you reward me after breaking through the siege? Long Qingxie asked with a charming smile. The next second, a strong blue light came out of Long Qingxie. He gripped backhand a long sword with blue light and rushed into the wolves with the remnant shadow still in situ. Howling. The angry wolves roared. Their roars spread all over the deep forest and startled countless birds. Flame, wolf roar, sword light, fighting spirit mingled with each other at this moment. This scene would absolutely startle the other people if they saw this. It was not easy to deal with the 4th-rank wolves even for a group of 5th-rank guards. But now, there were only 2 people. This battle was not only a battle of strength, but also one testing the courage to fight desperately. There was no tacit understanding between them at first, but in the course of fighting, they quickly developed a unique tacit understanding. Unconsciously, they trusted each other and even give their back to each other for protection. When the battle was over, the surrounding soil had been dyed red, and bloody smell diffused. Smelling the blood, other evil beasts in the forest itched for action. Go! Yunwu clenched the blood-stained sword in hand, stepped on the corpses of the fire wolves and walked in the direction of the periphery. Her clothes were stained with a lot of blood. Although most of them were the blood of fire wolves, she also got hurt by the claws of wolves. Are you okay? Would you like to find a place to clean your wounds and apply the medicine by the way? Long Qingxie's sword had vanished in the air, and he asked Yunwu. His white clothes were also stained with blood, but compared with Yunwu, he just got a few bloodstains by accident. No, we should leave here first. Yunwu inexplicably had a bad feeling in her heart. She felt that some kind of danger was approaching. Not long after Yunwu and Long Qingxie left, 2 figures in black robes flew over from the depths of the mountains. The smell of blood attracted the evil beasts in the forest and the corpses of fire wolves were torn and eaten by them. And the coming 2 figures stood in the air. When they observed the situation on the ground with their gloomy eyes, they soon frowned. Somebody hunted fire wolves in this inner forest, one black-robed man said with dignity in his old voice. According to the tracks, it's 2 people. One should just break through the initial stage of the 5th rank with fire attribute. But I can't figure out the cultivation of another one. Another black-robed man squinted his gloomy eyes, as a touch of homicidal intent flashed across his eyes. If Yunwu heard this, she would break out into a cold sweat. From the messy scene on the ground, they could know how many people was here and one of them had the strength of the 5th level. What was more, the spot had already been destroyed by other beasts. It took only a glance to get all the information. How powerful were the 2 black-robed men? The man with the old voice also had a hint of murderous intent in his eyes. This place is near the cliff of the royal secret tunnel, and the treasure guardian died on the cliff, so it seems that the 2 people are bound to have some relationship with the treasure theft. They must have not gone far yet. Let's look for them separately. As the voice fell, the 2 figures suddenly turned into 2 shadows and disappeared separately. Near the boundary of Evil Beast Forest, Yunwu was like a gust of wind. She moved quickly, hiding her breath, along the cliff and towards the periphery of the forest. She felt a terrible sense of crisis, and the dangerous feeling of being locked upon by a venomous snake did not disappear until she was near the boundary of the forest. What was wrong? Why did she suddenly have this strange feeling? She was full of doubts, but no matter how hard she tried to find out the reason, she seemed to be at a loss. Maybe that was intuition. Long time later, when this intuition appeared several times, Yunwu got this radar-like intuition because of her birth. Of course, this was another story. My girl, I have something to do. Since boundary of the forest is just in front of you, I have to stop accompanying you here and I will come to see you in my convenient time. Long Qingxie, who followed Yunwu, suddenly stopped and said. Yunwu turned her head and looked at him doubtfully. Who on earth are you? Every time, he appeared at her crisis and then disappeared without trace. She knew nothing about him. Long Qingxie smiled evilly and looked at Yunwu with dark eyes. One day you will know me, and when that day comes, you shall fall in love with me. Hearing this, Yunwu frowned. It was obvious that she felt uncomfortable to his words. Long Qingxie reached out and touched her head. His magnetic voice turned to a doting tone. Don't show it so obviously that you don't like me, it will hurt my heart, but... Speaking of this, he paused. The next moment, Yunwoo seemed to see a dash of arrogance in his dark eyes. Believe me, in this world, only I can match you, and only you can be with me. What an arrogant tone it was. Yunwoo got stunned, and felt a tremor in her heart. Where on earth did his confidence come from? How could he just make such a domineering declaration so proudly with such certainty? I've searched all over the forest and haven't found you. It turns out that this trash is hiding in this remote corner. Shortly after Yunwoo reached the periphery of the forest, a sharp voice came. Turning around, she saw Yun Qing'er and Yun Lingshui coming toward her. My third sister, look, this trash is covered with blood. Is she hurt seriously? Yun Qing'er stared at Yunwoo teasingly. I heard that at the beginning of the game, you rushed into the woods. So this trash wants to win the game. Yun Lingshui's eyes were cold but her tone was mocking. Third sister, we have not taught this bitch a good lesson for a long time, so that she has forgotten what is reality. Hearing Yun Qing'er's words, Yun Lingshui sneered. What are you waiting for? As soon as the voice fell, Yun Lingshui drew out a long whip from her waist. She threw the whip at Yunwoo fiercely with a look of contempt and disgust. The look in Yunwoo's eyes turned cold. Yun Qi asked her to show mercy to them, but they came to her first and took the initiative to trouble her. Moving quietly, Yunwoo took the whip with a backhand. She said coldly, it seems that you really want to die. Yun Lingshui mocked and sneered, since you this trash dare talk to me in such a tone, it seems that it is you that want to die. Yellow fighting spirit raised from Yun Lingshui. She intended to withdraw her whip out of the hand of Yunwoo with much strength. But she couldn't. Yun Lingshui frowned, as a trace of doubt flashed across her eyes. She gave another try, but she found that she was still unable to pull back the whip with all her energy. How was that possible? When Yun Qing'er saw this, she also frowned and said, what are you doing, third sister? There's no need to be merciful to this trash. Otherwise, sooner or later, she'll ride roughshod over us. When Yun Lingshui saw that Yun Qing'er only made some irresponsible remarks beside, a touch of rage raised in her heart, cut the crap. Why are you standing there still? Yun Qing'er's eyes was gloomy and she felt dissatisfied with the commanding tone of Yun Lingshui. In fact, she had promoted to the second level of cultivation and Yun Lingshui was still in mid-term of first level. How could Yun Lingshui command her? But this was not the time to break up with Yun Lingshui. After pulling out her whip, Yun Qing'er threw it straight at Yunwoo with a wisp of fighting spirit. Bang! A deep mark left on the ground. Yunwoo avoided the hit but Yun Qing'er did not see how Yunwoo did it clearly. Yun Qing'er was angry, you this trash, I haven't settled the score that you ate my tier 2 pill last time. Today, I'll settle all the scores. Yun Qing'er waved the whip fiercely like a snake. Yunwoo dodged without haste, but a touch of coldness flashed across her eyes. Third sister, don't you intend to explain this matter? Don't you feel shame to make me a scapegoat of you? Yun Lingshui was stunned, but soon, she got angry, you this trash dare to slander me. A few days ago, Grandpa supported you. But today, I will give up my surname if I couldn't make you cry. Yun Lingshui wanted the tier 2 elemental wind pill originally, but she lost to Yun Qing'er in the bid. As a daughter of lineal descent in Yun family, how could she be willing to lose? So she let people steal it from Yun Qing'er. Only her mother knew about this thing. How could Yunwoo know it? A killing intention rose in Yun Lingshui's heart. This thing must not be known to others. Otherwise, how could she face others proudly? This was a kind of human inferiority. She not only was selfish, but also liked bullying the weak. Feeling her whip could not be pulled back, Yun Lingshui dropped it then. Her yellow fighting spirit rose, her feet moved and she hatefully rushed to stab Yunwoo with a dagger in her hand. Yun Lingshui really wants to kill me. Yun Wu, with anger flickering in her eyes, avoided the attack quickly. By backhand, the whip on her hand fiercely swept towards Yun Lingshui. Instantly, the whip was wrapped around the neck of Yun Lingshui and tied it tightly. The astonishment flashed across Yun Lingshui's eyes. With a cold humph, Yun Wu suddenly lifted the long whip. Yun Lingshui, who was tied by the whip around the neck, was thrown out in an instant. Ah! The scream arose, with a bump. Yun Lingshui directly hit a tree not far away. With a painful humph, she fainted. The crisp cracking made it clear that Yun Lingshui broke 2 ribs at least. Remember, from now on, you will no longer one member of Yun family. There was a hint of satire in her cold voice. At this time, Yun Wu turned her head and looked at Yun Qing'er coldly. It's your turn. Yun Qing'er's eyes were filled with astonishment. How could she possibly throw away a mid-first level person? She was just a trash without any fighting spirit. How? You, this trash, where did you steal martial arts from? Yun Qing'er's eyes were cold and she waved her whip swiftly toward Yun Wu. You bitch, you are really addicted to stealing. You stole not only my pill, but also other people's martial arts. If I do not teach you a lesson today, you won't know what the rules of Yun family. The whip came near. Rage flickered in Yun Wu's eyes. Did she have to steal other people's martial arts? It seemed that Yun Qing'er wanted to gain mastery by striking first. But Yun Wu wouldn't allow herself to be thrown into passivity. Not before, nor in the future. Since you are so fond of talking about Yun's rules, then I'll let you know the rules. With a cold expression on the face, Yun Wu moved her feet. At the same time, the whip in her hand quickly and severely was whipped at Yun Qing'er. Thwack, she cracked her whip. This whip not only broke Yun Qing'er's flesh in an instant, but also pulled her away with ferocious force. Ah! Yun Qing'er's face was pale, as she rolled back. She aroused her fighting spirit and tried to resist the beating. However, the whip penetrated her defensive fighting spirit, and directly attacked her body. Bloodstains appeared on her body one by one. Suddenly, Yun Wu seemed to perceive that a large number of people in the distance were chasing an evil beast, coming towards them. I just give you a little warning this time, Yun Wu mocked and sneered, and then the whip stopped. Yun Qing'er's eyes were full of horror. She stared at Yun Wu grimly. You. Originally, she wanted to curse. But her following words were stopped upon Yun Wu's cold purple eyes. Purple eyes? A gush of fear rose from the bottom of Yun Qing'er's heart and it sent a chill down her spine. What was the matter? In the blink of an eye, the strange purple eyes of Yun Wu restored to black as if the purple eyes Yun Qing'er just saw was her illusion. How could this happen? Was it really her illusion? Yun Qing'er blinked her eyes and tried hard to see the eyes of Yun Wu again. Yun Wu slowly raised the lip corner and inexplicably smiled. Sixth sister, it's time for you to protect us. What did her words mean? Just when Yun Qing'er was in confusion, Yun Wu came forward and pulled Yun Qing'er up from the ground. The whip was handed to Yun Qing'er. Then, Yun Wu pretended to be weak on purpose and immediately fainted on the ground. Yun Qing'er didn't figure out what was going on. Suddenly, a roar of tigers came behind Yun Qing'er. Roar. The roar shocked the earth. Yun Qing'er turned around subconsciously, but the next moment, she was almost scared to urination. A third-level golden spot tiger. Why was there a third-level evil beast on the periphery of the forest? She had just reached the second level. How could she defeat a third-level evil beast? The golden spot tiger galloped like it was being chased by something. Seeing Yun Qing'er was on its way, the tiger roared and opened its big mouth with sharp fangs as if trying to tear her apart. As the big mouth approached her, Yun Qing'er's face was pale white and her legs were shivering like noodles. She instinctively backed up quickly and wanted to run away. But she was stumbled by the body of Yunwu, who fainted beside suddenly. Ah! At the moment of falling, Yun Qing'er gritted her teeth angrily. That trash really gets me into trouble this time. At that moment, however, a cold light flashed before her eyes. When she fixed her eyes on it, a dagger had been inserted into the head of the tiger already. That dagger belonged to Yun Lingshui, who wanted to pierce Yunwu with it. Yun Qing'er didn't know how this happened. She just saw that tiger raised its head and roared when the dagger pierced its head. Its huge body instantly fell toward her. Yun Qing'er quickly dodged. To ensure own safety, Yun Qing'er waved the whip in her hand and severely attacked the head of the golden spot tiger, which was still breathing. This scene was seen by the coming group. Wow! Those people gave a sharp intake of breath when they saw the golden spot tiger fell down upon the attack from Yun Qing'er. At this point, Yun Qing'er seemed to notice the people present. The long whip stained with blood was still held in her hand. She was stunned, looking at Zhou Tianyu, who was walking slowly towards her. Are you all right, Qing'er? The noble black eyes were stained with a touch of gentleness. Coupled with his handsome face and noble status, his charm could not be resisted by any women present. Yun Qing'er took a deep breath and slowed down her chaotic heartbeat. Your Highness. I'm all right. It's just a small injury. The bloodstains on her body made those people mistake that she had fought with the golden spot tiger fiercely. Qing'er. A voice with dignity arose. Yun Qi came from the distance, walking fast forward her. Grandpa, seeing Yun Qing'er was stunned. Why did Grandpa come? Yun Qi came over and his sharp eyes swept around. When he saw the unconscious Yun Wu next to the body of the golden spot tiger, a dark current flashed across his eyes. What's the matter? He inquired in a deep voice. Grandpa, I. However, before Yun Qing'er answered, other ministers who followed Zhou Batian slowly came up. When the others saw Zhou Batian, they were somewhat surprised and knelt down to greet him. Zhou Batian waved his hand and laughed, Stand up. I heard that a 3-level evil beast ran out from the inner forest, so I came with ministers to see which lady is better in strength, but it seems that we are too late. Zhou Tianyu greeted Zhou Batian with a respectful smile and said, Father, as soon as we catch up the tiger, we saw it was killed by Miss Sixth of Yun family. Hearing his words, the ministers behind Zhou Batian gasped in surprise and fixed their eyes on Yun Qing'er instantly. Their eyes were hot and full of inquiry. Would this lady be the summoner of Yun family in the divination of Imperial Preceptor? She must have something special since she could kill the 3rd-level golden spot tiger. Miss Yun, may I know what strength level you've reached now? An old minister asked in a slightly respectful tone. This surprised all the other ladies and several princes present. Why did the arrogant old guy ask the young generation in such a tone? Yun Qing'er was uncomfortable under such stares. She immediately answered with nervousness and respect, My lord, I've just broken through to the early stage of the 2nd level. The early stage of 2nd level, the old minister raised his eyebrows and swept his eyes over Yun Qing'er again, laughing kindly, breaking through to the 2nd level at such a young age is really amazing, you have great potential. The meaning of the word, potential, could only be understood by the ministers present. When Yun Qing'er heard his words, she regarded it as praise so she could not help but secretly rejoice. Her mother had been asking her to keep a low profile and mask her nature. She could not help but feel proud and decided not to tell the truth in front of the emperor, ministers, and princes. Your Majesty, I think the Miss Sixth of Yun family must be the winner of this hunting contest. The old minister looked respectfully at Zhou Batian with a smile. Yes, the other ministers echoed his views together, without any doubt. Zhou Batian smiled and said nothing. His deep eyes swept around for a while. It seemed that he was looking for something. Yun Wu, who was lying beside the golden spot tiger, was secretly alarmed by Zhou Batian's keen vision. He might be aware of her abnormal status if she didn't use silver needles to control her weak breath. For a long time, Zhou Batian did not find anything unusual, and then he drew back his sight and fixed his eyes on Yun Qing'er. Good. Well, this year's winner of the hunting competition is Miss Sixth of Yun family. Thank you for your grace. Hearing Zhou Batian's words, Yun Qing'er was happy and immediately thanked the emperor for his kindness. Since the hunt is over, we should go back to the palace and let the young people play with each other. Yes, your majesty. A group of people left with momentum as it came. The young ladies and princes taking part in the hunt game were surprised by the sudden appearance of the emperor and the ministers. However, after that, the princes present all looked at Yun Qing'er with fervent eyes. It was an honor that the emperor and all the ministers all admitted her power of killing the third-level evil beast. If anyone could marry her, he would feel very dignified. Miss Yun, I wonder if you are free tomorrow. How about going to the lake together? Miss Yun. Suddenly, many princes came forward to invite Yun Qing'er. Yun Qing'er, however, turned her eyes to Zhou Tianyu. Her goal was to be the crown princess from the beginning to the end. Zhou Tianyu looked up proudly, but smiled gently. I also wonder if Qing'er is free tomorrow. At this moment, Yun Qing'er was extremely excited and her eyes was full of pride. She enjoyed the envy of other girls and slowly walked to Zhou Tianyu. With a shy nod, she answered, as long as your highness invite me, I'll be free at any time. It seemed that Yun Qing'er never thought about who shot the dagger into the head of the golden spot tiger. At this time, she only indulged in the pleasure of being envied by other girls. No one present noticed the disappearance of Yun Wu and Yun Lingshui, who originally lay on the ground. In a luxurious carriage. Yun Qi stared at Yun Wu with strange eyes from the palace to the outside. He didn't blink all the way. It was unbearable. Grandpa, I know I'm pretty, but I have to tell you that I am not interested in old men. Yun Wu glanced at Yun Qi and said with a teasing coldness. Hearing this, Yun Qi was choked and said, the words said by you little girl always make me angry. That's because your gaze makes my flesh creep, Yun Wu replied straightforward. Yun Qi drew back his gaze then, but soon, he grinned at her. To tell the truth, his wrinkled face was like a chrysanthemum when he was laughing, which really did not look good. Just come to the point quickly, Yun Wu wanted to roll her eyes. The old man really knew how to challenge the limitation of her taste. Today, Imperial Preceptor has predicted that a summoner will be born in our Yun family, from the 9 girls, including you. Yun Qi stared at her and said. Yun Wu raised her eyebrows. The divination from Imperial Preceptor. She had memory of Imperial Preceptor of Zhou dynasty. She also heard that his divination never was wrong. So he was known as the first prophet of God, due to his ability of prediction. It seemed that her behavior in the forest profited Yun Qing'er by accident. Presumably, the emperors and ministers must think that the person who would become a summoner was Yun Qing'er. So what? Yun Wu casually said. You little girl, do you think I don't know what you did in the forest? You really regard your grandpa as an old fool? If your grandpa hadn't covered up it for you in advance, do you think you could escape Zhou Batian's sight by that means? Yun Qi said angrily, but he deliberately suppressed his voice. In the carriage, Yun Lingshui, who was in a coma, was beside them. He covered up it for her. Yes, before the emperor's eyes fell on her, she seemed to feel a very gentle warm breath covering her body. She thought it was an illusion, but it turned out that it was from Yun Qi, who helped her secretly. Suddenly, Yun Wu's eyes darkened, as a sense of frustration hit her. Damn it! She was still too weak. With her present strength, she might only be able to resist some enemies. When she met a real master, she could only be slaughtered. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.